The main character's name is Mason. He just woke up and found himself on the roof of a multi-story building. His head was splitting as if after a long night spent in a nightclub. Mason was accompanied by a strong smell of rotten meat. He did not immediately understand why he was on the roof and not in his bed. The stench was clearly everywhere, and screams and groans could be heard from below the building. Mason looked down and couldn't understand why there were so many people there. People were just stamping their feet and making strange sounds. It looked a bit like a strike. But something was not as usual. Mason looked closely and realized that it was not a strike, or even people. It was a crowd of rotting zombies. As soon as Mason realized this, he was thrown off the edge of the roof. He was scared and didn't understand what was happening because a second ago he was in the normal world. Mason started looking for his phone and seeing what was going on online, but his pockets were empty. He had no money, no phone, no keys to his apartment. He only had a pack of peanuts with him. Mason remembered that he had bought them at the store the day before. Mason was upset. He thought that now he would definitely die. He would just gnaw the nuts and immediately go to the next world. The girl had never even existed, and he was already dying. Suddenly, a door opened sharply a few meters away from him. It was the incomparable Melanie, who had clearly been surviving in this world for more than one day. Her figure was emphasized by tight clothes that fit closely to her body. She didn't notice Mason, but he continued to watch this from around the corner like a fearless girl. At first, Mason didn't understand how to act, but he couldn't help but continue to watch her graceful, alluring gait. Melanie walked up to the barrel and pierced it with a knife. Water splashed out of her and began to flow down her body. Melanie slowly unbuttoned her latex top to let the water wash over her ample breasts. She washed the caked blood and dirt from her long legs and firm buttocks. Mason watched her, drooling from his mouth. He had never seen such a sexy girl. Mason lost his balance on one leg and a stone flew out from under his boot. Melanie heard it right away, because surviving in this world taught her to be sensitive and always ready for a fight. Before she could even button her clothes, she immediately rushed towards Mason. Having reached the corner, she saw Mason lying on the ground, confused, who only managed to say hello to her, and immediately received a good right hook to the face. Melanie took out her gun and pressed it to Mason's forehead, ordering him not to move, and Mason began to beg her for mercy. He didn't want anything bad. Melanie, without removing the gun from his face, immediately asked who he was and what he was doing here. Mason didn't even think about his life. His gaze was drawn to Melanie's feet, which were at once so close and so far away from him. Melanie looked closely at Mason and realized he was looking at her buttocks and not her face. For this, Mason gets another good punch in the face. He's starting to piss her off, and Melanie is ready to cut him into little pieces and feed him to those rotten zombies that have gathered downstairs. But the powerful, huge zombie behind her simply didn't let her finish what she started. She heard him approaching and ready to attack. Melanie managed to jump back in time. It wasn't a surprise for her, but Mason clearly didn't expect to see this, and only managed to think that before his death, he at least managed to look at the beauty. The monster bully immediately started with the defenseless Mason. Mason first thought that this monster belonged to Melanie, and said that although he was looking at her curvy figure, he couldn't kill him for that. But Melanie understood perfectly well what danger lay before them, and began to shoot. Bullets flew from both of Melanie's hands like in a real blockbuster. The mutant's skull was too thick for bullets to penetrate. However, it hit him in the eye and now he's just swinging his claws. But if he keeps swinging like that and smashing everything around, he might attract a crowd of low-level zombies, which would definitely lead to a disaster. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. His upper body is huge, leaving little support for his lower body, and his right leg appears to have been broken before birth, making him a slow mover. Melanie analyzed the situation and got out the bandsaw. It had very sharp teeth and was designed specifically for fighting giant zombies. Now the mutant rushed at her, and judging by his size, he could simply crush her with one blow. Mason started screaming and asking her to run away from there quickly, but Melanie was clearly not a timid girl and had no intention of running away. She rushed to attack the huge mutant. With one swing of the bandsaw, she cut off his leg. The mutant was not agile, and without one leg, he simply fell to the ground, and Melanie jumped on top and was able to hug his neck with a bandsaw. One sharp movement and the zombie's head was already lying on the ground. Mason was shocked by what he saw and would never have been able to believe that a small, fragile girl could do such a thing to a huge zombie. And Melanie had just taken out the mutant's core, which was of pretty good quality, from his body. Melanie got off the zombie and was unhappy with only one thing. She had just taken a shower, and now she was covered in rotten blood again. Melanie turned her attention to Mason, who was squatting with his back turned to her. She asked why he was so cowardly and which camp he was from. Mason didn't believe that this was reality. He ate nuts and thought that this dream was very realistic. Now he will sleep it off and wake up in his bed. Melanie walked closer and took the peanut from Mason like she was a small child. Melanie looked at the nuts with bated breath and asked where he got the valuable longevity nuts from. Mason said that if she wanted some nuts too, she could have just asked instead of taking them all. Melanie got tired of this frivolous conversation. She put a bandsaw to Mason's neck and repeated her question about where he came from and where he found such rare food. The cold touch of the saw and the searing pain Mason felt when he cut himself made him finally realize that it was all real. He introduced himself and said that the peanuts were just a snack he bought at a regular supermarket. Suddenly, a bullet pierced Melanie's leg. They hadn't yet had time to realize it, and the pain from the bullet in her leg had just begun to reach Melanie when a hail of bullets rained down on them. They hid behind the wall. Mason was terrified. This had never happened to him in real life. Melanie's leg was bleeding profusely, and he said that Melanie urgently needed medical attention. Melanie realized that there were more zombies in this area for a reason. People appeared here. Meanwhile, a group of bandits were discussing from the roof of another building that it was a great idea to lure zombies here so that Melanie could kill them, and then they could profit from the easily obtained cores. One of the bandits got a little scared when he saw Melanie dealing with the zombies and asked the leader if she would come for them to avenge the bullet in her leg. The boss said that there was cadaveric poison in this bullet, and now Melanie's death will not be long in coming. Meanwhile, Melanie's leg began to swell, and she realized that it was cadaveric poison. Melanie said that even though her body had evolved and she now had immunity, this poison was much more serious than a normal infection, and this time she could die. Realizing this, Melanie began to cry and told Mason that people from the 17th camp were shooting at them. They needed the zombie fruit that she got. If they met them, they would definitely kill them. Mason asked in horror what they should do now. Melanie said she could hold them off long enough for Mason to escape. But what would happen to Melanie? Melanie said that there was cadaveric poison in her, and only penicillin could neutralize it if Mason did not leave. Then very soon Melanie would turn into a zombie, and then Mason would definitely not be able to leave. She asked Mason to find her sister and tell her to run, because without her protection, the bandits from Camp 17 would catch her and do something terrible to her. And if she ran, she would at least have a chance. Mason said that he might be able to find penicillin and save her, but Melanie said that it was almost impossible, because it was one of the rarest things in the world. Melanie threw a few smoke bombs and said she would shoot back, and when the smoke rose, Mason could escape through the door she came through. She gave Mason a note and said that her sister was here, and when he found her, they absolutely had to run. Melanie started shooting back and ordered Mason to run. Mason rushed to the exit, but all he could think about was that he couldn't just leave Melanie because she had saved his life, and he had to repay her in kind. Mason just thought that he wanted to return to his world because penicillin is available in any pharmacy. The system immediately worked, and a voice in his head asked if he really wanted to return to his world. Mason asked the system again if he would be able to return back if he were transported to his world for a while. The program responded that he could return at any time. Then Mason said that he needed to move to the real world right now. Mason woke up in a hospital bed. The voices of passers-by and motorists could be heard from the street. The world was the same, and the foul smell was no longer there. Mason walked out into the hospital corridor, where life went on as usual. Mason ran headlong down the corridor. He ran quickly and shouted only one word: penicillin. Meanwhile, Melanie was sitting on the roof. The poison consumed Melanie piece by piece. She thought of only one thing. She wanted Mason to definitely get to her sister and warn her of the danger. The shooting stopped, and the bandits thought that Melanie was no longer able to fight back. Their boss said it was time to reap the fruits of their labor. Mason was stopped by a nurse and told that he couldn't run in the hallways. He saw the nurse with a tray of pills. Without thinking twice, Mason grabbed all the pills under his shirt, after which he immediately started running, not reacting in any way to the nurse's cries, and started running again. He told the program that he urgently needed to be transferred to another world. Melanie continued to sit motionless on the roof, lifeless. Suddenly, a finger touched her face. Luckily, it was Mason. He asked if she was still alive, to which Melanie simply turned to face him. But Melanie didn't like it. She hoped that he was already warning her sister, and he returned to her when she was almost a zombie. Melanie furiously asked why he returned. Mason anticipated her negative reaction and immediately took out a bottle of penicillin. He said he had come to save her and took a bottle of penicillin with him. Melanie couldn't believe her eyes where he got it from. Mason asked her to ask fewer questions. She need not worry. It was real penicillin. It was too early to die. They would get out of here together in their right minds and sound memory. After these words, Mason handed her a pill. Melanie swallowed the pill, even though she didn't trust Mason, but she had no choice. A few minutes passed and Mason asked her how she was feeling. Melanie examined her leg. It was back to normal and there were no signs of infection. Melanie couldn't believe that the poison had been suppressed in such a short time. What kind of penicillin was it? Just as Melanie put on her boot, the door to the roof opened. These were the same bandits. Their boss ordered to find the little creature and take the monster's core. And if you're lucky, you can have some fun if it's still warm. Melanie came around the corner with a bandsaw and asked if that was the one they wanted to have fun with. She said that she was just about to start looking for them, and they came to her themselves. How is this possible? How could she survive? The bandits clearly decided to escape from there as quickly as possible. Mason was waiting for Melanie in the apartment. Terrible sounds of violence were heard from above. He thought that she clearly would not need help. On the table, he found a notebook, neatly lying in the corner. Mason started to leaf through it. It was a personal diary. But who would write something like that? July 21st, 2080, sunny outside, plump young woman from the house across the street went out into the street again to hang out her clothes. She appears on the street from time to time. A trifle, but nice. And what a figure she has. July 22nd, partly cloudy. Today, a new manager was transferred to the company, who was seated next to me. She must be training a lot because her butt is just space. Maybe I don't like the woman from the house across the street that much. The new girl's ass just makes you drool. There are rumors of a virus outbreak in a neighboring town, but I hope it doesn't reach them. Something happens to the girl. Her body becomes covered in spots. She becomes not herself. The guy sits under the table in horror and watches his manager's transformation. So they began to appear in the real world. Unexpectedly, gradually, without warning. The company was immediately quarantined. They even limited me to 4 walls and didn't allow me to leave. July 24th, the virus had hit most of the city. Residents were left with minimal provisions. Calls to the people responsible for my confinement were going unanswered. If this continued, I might just die of hunger. On July 25th, despite the ban on leaving, I broke the door lock and decided to find food on my own. However, I was overcome with horror when I came out. The city was destroyed and seemed abandoned. When I arrived at the supermarket, there were real fights over food. People went crazy with vandalism and looting, grabbing whatever they could. After I managed to get some food and medicine, I saw the infected biting people. On August 22nd, 2 days ago, the television signal suddenly disappeared, and the presenter on the last recording said that no one would come to help and we could only help ourselves. I even thought it was a little funny. On August 17th, all the food ran out, but I'm afraid that if I leave the room, I might be eaten by hordes of infected. The last few days, I've been filling my stomach with water and really missing the manager's juicy ass. Suddenly, I heard the screams of a woman from the neighboring house, whom I periodically watched from the window. Her own husband attacked her and stabbed her to death. I just couldn't believe it. My own husband killed my neighbor. He was sitting over her corpse. What was he doing there? He seemed to sense my intense gaze and began to turn around. Drops of blood dripped from his mouth. I quickly bent down and hid so that he wouldn't have time to notice me and come after me. On August 19th, after 4 days without food, I was simply dying. And when I was already in complete despair, someone knocked on my door. This man was looking for penicillin. He exchanged a huge pile of food for my penicillin. It really worked better than the most powerful antibiotics. It was even hard to believe that antibiotics did not work. But some simple penicillin was the most powerful medicine. When I was on the balcony on August 21st, I found a man below who was eating dead zombies. How can he even do that? He took a clot out of their head, which he ate without leaving the zombies, wondering if it was really edible. On August 30th, I discovered that all my penicillin had been stolen. It was my only hope for salvation. On September 1st, I decided to leave this cage-like house. Even if the world around is full of infected people, I am not going to die of hunger in my room. So I came face to face with a zombie for the first time. I took out a kitchen knife and there were only 2 options. Either the zombie would eat me, or I would eat it. This was the last entry in the diary. It seems the author of this diary never survived his first encounter with a zombie. Anyway, the diary gave Mason an understanding of what was happening in this world. People infected with the virus were turning into zombies that ate people. And judging by the current food shortage situation, most people were already infected. And the most important thing here is him. Penicillin is worth more than gold in this world. And the most important thing is that Mason could easily buy it in his world. And that meant only one thing. Suddenly, Mason felt a gun at his head again. It was the gangster boss. He now understood how Melanie was able to survive. They had a jar of penicillin. A moment later, Mason was already on his knees, and the boss was looking at the jar of penicillin. It was full. He couldn't believe his eyes, because if he gave it to his bosses, he would be promoted 3 steps forward. But Mason was not so lucky. Because he could go to hell, he immediately realized that he was on the verge of death and said that he still had some. Melanie suddenly entered the apartment. The boss took Mason hostage and warned Melanie that if she took one more step, Mason would be no more. Melanie said that if he shot, then her reaction would not be long in coming. She demanded to let Mason go, and then she would leave him alive, especially since it was worth listening to the sounds outside. The noise of gunfire and the smell of fresh human blood has attracted a large group of zombies, and if they don't go their separate ways right now, they will all die together at the hands of the rotting dead. The gangster boss's name was Logan, and he knew perfectly well that the meeting with the zombie group could be the last. But at the same time, he did not want to let go of such a golden guy as Mason. Logan was thinking about what was the right thing to do, and Melanie continued to demand that Mason be released. She killed so many of Logan's brothers, he promised revenge. Logan pushed Mason into Melanie and released the harpoon, catching himself on a nearby building. He began to climb the chains to the neighboring building on automatic traction, and promised that the next time they met, he would cut Melanie into pieces and feed her to the zombies. Mason, meanwhile, was already calm and pressed his face to Melanie's chest. Melanie asked Mason if he would let go on his own, or if he needed a little help. The city was enveloped in a dark night. Hordes of zombies continued to wander aimlessly through the streets. Melanie looked out the window and said that they were far enough away from these walkers that, after they rested a little, they could set off again. Melanie looked at Mason with her bright blue eyes and said that she wanted to clarify a few things. Firstly, who he was, and where he got such rare things as peanuts and penicillin, which ordinary people have long since ceased to have. Mason didn't answer right away. He thought that although Melanie looked like a very capable girl, she would never reveal her cards, which meant that he shouldn't reveal his cards right away either. He needed to somehow dodge the answer. Mason sat down on the table and tossed Melanie a pack of penicillin. Melanie hadn't seen him for so long that it felt like she was holding not penicillin in her hands, but a large piece of gold. Mason said that she could have the entire jar as payment for saving him, and if Melanie promised to follow him and protect him, she could get more. Melanie asked Mason again how serious his intentions were. He said that if Melanie agreed, he would give her not only penicillin, but also many other valuable things in this world. Melanie couldn't believe he had anything more important than penicillin. Mason began to tell a very tasty story. Steamed lamb, bear paw, roast duck and chicken, steak, burger, roast goose, marinated salted duck, chicken and sauce, bacon, preserved eggs, dried meat, sausage, smoked chicken with white belly, steamed pork. Melanie stood there imagining these dishes and her stomach began to hurt. She asked Mason to stop. She wiped away her drool and said that she would not agree to defend him only for these things, especially since he could turn out to be a person from the camp of her opponents. But Mason hastened to reassure her, because he did not belong to any camp. He said that Melanie might think of him as a spoiled, handsome man who would turn her life into paradise, but Mason thought to himself that he was just an unlucky 21st century worker. Melanie thought he certainly looked like a spoiled brat, but she survived thanks to the penicillin he gave her, and although she hated to admit it, he was clearly her savior. After thinking for a moment, Melanie said that she was in. From now on, she would always follow him and protect him. But if she found even a hint that his words were a lie, then she would cut him into small pieces and cook him into cutlets. Mason was pleased with himself because he had earned the trust, and now the accompaniment of a beautiful girl, and now she would always be with him, and maybe he would finally have physical intimacy with a real girl. Mason said that now that there was a verbal agreement between them, he wanted to ask something, namely, what had happened to the world. Melanie, like a real school teacher, began to conduct a mini tour of the world. The culprit of the end of the world is a virus that has turned normal people into zombies, with the infection rate being approximately 80%, reducing the planet's population from 9 billion to 1, and the rest of the people have become the walking dead. The zombie core has both plant and mineral properties. When directly ingested, it provides the body with a large amount of energy for a short period of time. However, if you prepare an evolution potion, then there is the possibility of evolving with various effects on the body. Evolution potions are divided into 3 levels. The first level provides the possibility of evolution by 20%, the second level by 30%, and the third by 35%. And they can be used separately or together to increase the chances of evolution. Due to the rapid adaptation of the virus, good powerful antibiotics quickly became ineffective. Namely, penicillin could constantly and quickly destroy the infection. But since the microorganisms that synthesize it also mutated, penicillin became an especially valuable medicine for saving lives. As soon as the virus began to affect humanity and people realized that it was impossible to defeat, people began to unite into groups. At the moment, there are 3 organizations operating in the city. These are Camp 17, Earth Construction, and Ascending Together. The group they met earlier were from Camp 17. They are the real bandits, openly burning, killing, and robbing everyone in their path. Have a lust for all kinds, including women. Their leader kills for pleasure and even feeds on human flesh. Mason thought a little about all of Melanie's words, and in general, the situation in the city was clear to him. Melanie looked outside and said that there were a lot of zombies around. And since Mason couldn't do anything at all, they should look for a place to spend the night and only leave at dawn. Mason sat on the bed and Melanie sat next to him on the couch. She told him to go to bed because he was of little use, so she would be on guard. He looked closely at her face. It was hard to imagine that she was as combative as he had seen her some time ago. Mason lay down on his bed and said he needed to travel back to the 21st century. The system has started the transfer. Mason opened his eyes slightly. He felt a little heavy, as if someone was sitting on him. When he opened his eyes fully, he saw a busty girl in front of him, who in a gentle, sweet voice asked him if he was awake. Mason quickly got out of bed and pushed the girl away from him. The girl was his mistress. He asked why she came to him. The owner said he was hit by a car, but the doctor said he would be fine. It was a good thing she had set up an emergency contact, otherwise the hospital wouldn't have been able to find anyone to pay his hospital expenses. Mason asked when she had managed to do all this, but the hostess did not listen to him and asked what he would like to eat. Mason felt awkward at being shown so much concern. The hostess laughed playfully, and she even felt embarrassed that Mason was so embarrassed. She got out of bed and said that she would go buy him everything he needed. Mason really needed some things that he could take to the parallel world, and he agreed. While no one was there, he needed to figure out the system. He realized that if he accessed the system, a kind of menu would appear on his hand. There were only 3 icons: memory, transfer, and charging. He immediately had a logical question about how to charge it and how much charge was left. Literally 10 minutes passed and the girl was already back, out of breath from the weight of 2 large bags. Mason quickly got out of bed and wanted to help, but the girl said that he shouldn't overexert himself. He just needed to rest. The girl's name was Emma. She was very rich and constantly showed attention to Mason. He understood this perfectly well, but given that he had no money at all, he considered himself unworthy of her and did not reciprocate her feelings. But suddenly, a brilliant idea came to his mind. If he had such a unique system, then, with the help of trade between worlds, he would be able to get rich both there and here. Suddenly, the door to the room opened sharply. It was Emma's uncle, and she asked him with displeasure what he was doing there. Uncle said he had come to pick her up and take her to Liam's for dinner. Emma got angry and said that she would not go to his place for dinner because she had her own plans. Her uncle didn't listen to her and simply pushed her out of the room because it was a direct order from her father. Her uncle closed the door of the room in front of her and told her to wait downstairs. He had a serious conversation with Mason. He walked silently over to Mason's bed and looked straight at him. Mason asked what problems he had. Uncle said that the problem should have solved itself. Wasn't the money they offered Mason enough? Mason suddenly asked, "What if he became rich?" Uncle thought for a moment and said that there was a good phrase. A small man always has big ambitions, but he knew everything about Mason. Therefore, he is sure that, having lived his whole life, Mason will never reach the top. However, Mason did not agree with him, and his words sounded like a challenge to action to him. In another world, the sun has already begun to shine. Melanie actively tried to wake Mason up. Mason woke up yawning a little, and Melanie looked out the window and said that it would take about an hour to get to their base from here. The streets were filled with hordes of zombies. Melanie walked boldly along the steep roof of the former shops, and Mason, holding onto the wall in horror, followed her. After an hour's journey, they stopped at the edge of one of the roofs. Melanie threw a pebble at the neighboring building, and from this building a suspension bridge began to descend, after which they entered the base via this bridge. Mason said the base was very well hidden. From the outside, he would never have guessed there was anything there. Melanie moved boldly through the corridors of the base, and Mason followed her silently. She entered the room where a completely bandaged girl lay. Apparently, she had been bitten and was covered in spots. The infection had already begun to completely consume her body. It was her sister Becca, and Melanie immediately gave her a penicillin tablet, happily informing her that she would soon be better. Mason asked what happened, why her sister looked so bad. Melanie said that she was wounded by zombies. She went on a sortie specifically to get the core of a mutant zombie. She could exchange it for penicillin, but was ambushed. Becca asked if she was okay and if she was hurt. Melanie said she was fine, and she brought a friend who got them penicillin, and if it weren't for him, they would never have met again. Becca, although she did not see Mason, immediately thanked him for saving her. He was a little uncomfortable because he got these drugs quite easily. He was amazed how two fragile girls were able to survive in such a terrible world. Melanie prepared the food and handed the plate to Mason. He was very happy about it, because they had been on their feet all day. He quickly pounced on the food and began chewing, but he immediately spat out the entire contents into the trash can. Melanie happily devoured the contents of her plate and asked Mason in surprise if he really didn't like it at all. Mason almost threw up and asked if they always ate this here. He even started to cry a little. Melanie asked again if the food she had prepared was really that bad. Mason said that they should stop eating such garbage. Melanie replied that she had a hard time fishing it all out of the river. Mason began to look through his pockets and asked Melanie to open her mouth. What Mason put in her mouth was simply delicious. This rich, milky taste is simply divine sweetness. Melanie froze and didn't move. Even though there was a storm of emotions in her head, Mason waved his hand in front of her face and said that it was just ordinary toffee. Melanie finally came to her senses and said it was amazing. He must have had one more candy, and he immediately began looking for it in his pockets. He put the second candy in Melanie's mouth. Melanie closed her mouth greedily and began chewing right into Mason's fingers. It was truly delicious. Mason was already a little afraid of her. She asked if he could get more of these candies. Now Mason was careful not to put candy in her mouth and put everything he had on the table. Melanie immediately gave one candy to her sister. The candy melted in her mouth and filled her not only with energy, but also with positivity. She immediately asked where such a treat came from, to which Melanie replied that their friend had given them the candy. The swelling began to slowly subside from Becky's face after she took the pill, and the candy brought back happiness and the desire to live. Mason felt sorry for these girls. They were happy with such simple things. He couldn't resist and dumped all the food he had on the table. Melanie couldn't believe her eyes. These were the delicious things she had so often read about in books. "Is this really all for the two of them?" Melanie asked. To which Mason replied that they don't have to worry because he still has many like him. She thought for a moment and decided to thank him. She took out a filled bag and handed it to Mason. He asked what was in it. Melanie said that these were all the cores she had managed to collect and now they belonged to him. As soon as she handed him the cores, the seal on her left hand began to burn. Could they be connected somehow? Mason agreed to take them, but asked again if she was sure that she wanted to give them all at once. Apparently, it was a very valuable thing. The penicillin he gave them saved their lives, and the same food costs much more. But later, she will collect more nuclei and pay off the entire debt. Mason took the bag of kernels and asked if they had a toilet. Melanie said it was around the corner. He went into the toilet, which was just a hole in the floor, which was obviously very deep. But there was nothing else to wait for, so Mason set about executing the plan. While he is alone, it is time to study how the cores and the program interact in his body. He brought one core to his hand and it began to be sucked inside. A second later, it disappeared completely. The voice in my head said that the charge was replenished. The transfer possibilities were +2. The total number of transfer possibilities was 3. Mason decided he needed to recharge some more. While he was refilling the charge over and over again, the cores began to spill out of the bag into the toilet. The charge has already been replenished to 9 transfer capabilities. Mason decided that 9 were enough for now, and the remaining cores. He looked closely at the bag and was surprised to see where the rest of the cores were. Mason looked into the toilet and realized that they had all spilled into the toilet, which was smelling terrible. His face just turned pale. Mason came out of the toilet so upset that he looked like a ghost. Melanie immediately asked what happened to him, to which he replied that he just had digestive problems. Melanie put the porridge she had prepared back on the table and said that Mason needed to eat to regain his strength. Mason didn't understand why they had to eat it again when he had given them so much delicious food. But Melanie said that it was impossible to eat such valuable food every day. Especially since she tried very hard and caught the ingredients from the river, it was impossible to let the good stuff go to waste. Mason stopped Melanie and said that there was no need to save. If needed, he would bring more. She ate her porridge and said that he had given them all the food he had. She didn't know he had any supplies in the system storage, and getting more food right now would be very strange. But his supplies were clearly not enough for the 3 of them to last a few days, so they needed to go back and get more. Mason made up a story. He said that he was a merchant and he was constantly brought supplies for trade, so there would always be enough food. But why didn't he say it right away? Mason said that he didn't trust Melanie right away, but tomorrow he would go for the goods and bring more food. A new day has dawned. Mason said he would go get the goods, but Melanie stopped him. She put a revolver in his hand. "But why is this revolver so small?" Melanie replied that it doesn't matter at all. The main thing is that it is suitable for stealth killings. Mason thanked her and said that he would be back very soon. Immediately after the door slammed, Becca got out of bed. Melanie was pleasantly surprised. She said that the pills that the guy brought worked very well. Becca took off her bandages and asked Melanie to follow him to see where he was going. His behavior and appearance are not like the locals, and he also knows very little about our world. The words that he is a merchant are most likely just a lie, to distract attention. Although he is extremely generous to them, it is too early to trust him. Mason walked for a long time through the buildings of the city. He went into some room, looked around. It seemed like no one was following him and he could get down to business. It's time to move into the real world. He woke up in the hospital again and decided it was time to be discharged, because he had no money at all for such a long stay in the hospital. This month he couldn't find a job again. His savings were running low, they were about to run out. Before it seemed to him that he could get rich. But in fact, he was just a poor man. But now he needed to take valuable food for that world. Food and medicine are very valuable in that world. But he has no buyers at all. If he goes to that camp of scumbags, they will simply take everything and finish him off. Mason placed a whole bunch of groceries on the checkout counter and asked to check out. Although Melanie was quite strong, the most she could help him with was not becoming zombie food. But she said that there were peaceful camps. Maybe it was worth starting to trade with them. The total came to $1,000. Mason came home with full bags. There was still enough space in the system storage. He needed to grab some more change of clothes. Half a core was needed for one move. He needed to try to save them. He remembered that toilet with regret. In fact, he shouldn't have been so economical if all the kernels hadn't spilled into it. Melanie peered into the distance and tried to figure out where Mason had gone, but he just seemed to have disappeared. Was she really that bad at tracking? She stood on the roof of the building and believed that here she had an excellent place for observation. Here she would be able to understand where he went. Mason moved back, more prepared. He decided to put some of the things in a backpack so that they wouldn't suspect anything. Last time there were much fewer zombies here. It would have been better to get around them somehow. But the further Mason went, the more zombies accompanied him. He was already at the edge of the roof, but there was a whole horde of zombies there. It was clearly impossible to get through here. In front of him, there were only a few wires that could be used to get to the next building. He thought it was better not to take any risks and go back. However, some zombies had already climbed onto the roof and were following his juicy, tender body. He had to come up with something urgently because the happy zombies were running after him. One of the zombies pushed him off the roof. He began to fall quickly and food flew around. However, at the last moment, Mason quickly managed to grab the wires, and the zombies simply fell down. Mason began asking to be transported to the real world. But the program said that at the moment the passive climbing ability is used, there is room for improvement. Mason was hanging onto the wires with all his might. The program said he had 7 skill points. The cost of upgrading was 1 skill point, and upgrading again cost 2 points. Mason didn't listen to the program at all and shouted, "Improve twice." The system reported that the passive climbing ability was improved by 2 levels, 3 skill points were spent. It was cool. Now Mason could hold the wire with one hand. It was just some kind of miracle. He could also walk on the wire just like on the ground. Maybe now he is a real Spider-Man. He crawled along the wire, mimicking Spider-Man, while Melanie quietly watched him. She thought that Mason was just a softie. But in fact, he was very clever after all. Becca was right. He is not as simple as it might seem at first glance. Mason finally jumped onto the roof of another building. That road was filled with zombies. He decided to climb higher to find another way to the base. He looked around and decided to climb another building. Mason immediately began to climb the building's cliffs. He was curious if there were any other skills in this system. He wanted to try them out as soon as possible. On one of the floors, Mason stopped and looked out the window. The building was filled with walking office dead. They saw Mason in the window and immediately rushed to attack, but the glass did not allow them to do so. He didn't climb any higher and decided to look at them up close, being confident that the glass would not let them reach him. However, the crowd of office zombies didn't think so. Under the weight of their bodies, the glass cracked, and that's when Mason realized that not everything was as wonderful as he thought. The glass broke and he fell. He managed to grab the edge of the floor and began to fight off the zombies with his other hand. With one wave of his hand, he cut off the zombie's head. His arms became so strong that he could easily cut off a zombie's head with one blow. The second zombie, and immediately the second blow. The head came off, just like the first zombie. However, Mason realized that even if he was Edward Scissorhands, he simply would not be able to cope with such a crowd of zombies. It's time to get out of there quickly. It was a rather dangerous game because if they pierced even a piece of skin, you could say goodbye to your life. In this world, it was clearly not worth showing off. By the way, Mason felt like it suddenly became easier to move around. Where did the backpack with food go? The backpack fell with all its contents. Mason even started to cry. Why does it always turn out like this? He didn't bring anything back during this trip. All the valuable things were lost, but he spent all his hard-earned fortune on them. He was going to save this money for his funeral, and he couldn't just say goodbye to it. He simply had to return it at any cost. He crawled to the window again and lured the zombie with his fresh, tender, fleshy hand. Zombies, like animals, began to jump out of the window in the hope of feasting on his hand. The office zombies decided to fly a little bit for the last time. It looked like all the zombies were already in flight. Mason's arm even went a little numb from such a large number, but it looked like the zombies were gone. Mason climbed into the building and took his backpack. He thought that they were not something to be afraid of. You just need to be smart. But something was clearly moving quickly behind him. He definitely saw a red shadow, or maybe he just imagined it. It wasn't just a shadow. It wasn't even just a zombie. It was a mutant. Moreover, he was very fast and agile, and he also wanted to taste Mason. The mutant hovered over Mason, and he had absolutely no idea what to do. Drops of blood from his mouth began to drip onto Mason's face, and after a second's wait, the mutant rushed to attack. One blow sent Mason flying out of the office space. However, realizing the full danger of the situation, he immediately started running. However, this mutant was not so simple. His speed was enormous, and Mason for him was just another living toy, which he could easily dine on. He ran as fast as he could, but the mutant was so fast that Mason didn't even see it coming. If he was transported to the real world, he would end up here again when he returned, so it was just a waste of cores. The mutant was already very close, and Mason said that he wanted to spend all his remaining points on improvements. All points spent. Climbing speed improved to level 6, special skills, bravery and prudence, and firm step also received. At that very moment, Mason managed to dodge the attacking mutant. Now he saw all his movements and still managed to dodge attacks. The mutant was still chasing Mason. He had spent all his points and this only made them equal in speed, but he still couldn't escape from him. Mason hoped that after such a pumping of abilities, he would be able to pin him down and destroy him. But he would not be able to run at such a speed for long. His strength was quickly leaving him. If you slow down even for 1 second, he will catch up with him and grab him by the neck to bite. But something had to be done, and Mason had a plan. He stopped abruptly. This is exactly what the mutant was waiting for. He would finally get to enjoy some fresh flesh. Mason managed to grab a piece of a stick, and he aimed it at the flying mutant. Due to the mutant's enormous speed, the stick entered his body like a knife through butter. She pierced the mutant, who was screaming in pain, right through. Mason crawled into the mutant's soft skull in search of its core, and, fortunately, he was able to get it. It was simply shining in his hands because it was his first well-deserved core. He was exhausted from the fatigue of running, but at the same time he was glad that it was all worth it. A few minutes later, Mason walked out of the building with a backpack over his shoulder, and Melanie was watching him from the roof. She knew perfectly well that the building was simply teeming with zombies, and she couldn't believe that he had managed to get out. Mason didn't notice her, and thought that at the moment, in terms of strength, he was about on the same level as Melanie. Following Melanie's example, he threw a pebble, and the entrance to their shelter opened. Mason immediately began calling the girls so that they could look at the new things that he had been able to bring them with such difficulty. At the door, he was met by Becca, who had changed greatly since their last meeting. She was a young girl, dressed in short shorts and a t-shirt that hugged her huge breasts. Mason didn't even immediately understand who was standing in front of him, because when she was all bandaged, he didn't even see her face. The girl winked at him and introduced herself. Didn't he recognize her? She came close to him and began to touch his body, asking where the blood on his clothes came from, how he felt, and if he was injured. Becca pressed her chest against him and began to rub against his body. She said that she would rather examine him completely. Mason couldn't even imagine this. Could his dreams really be coming true? Such a cute girl wants to examine him completely, and even rubs her big breasts. He already began to think that this world is not so bad. She visually examined Mason and said that she did not find any bites, so he really was fine. Took his hand and asked him to come wash with her because he was so dirty. Mason didn't immediately understand what Becca wanted. He asked again if she really was inviting him to take a shower together. Becca said that water sources were very limited right now, winked again, and said that they needed to conserve. Warm water was already pouring over Becky's body. She was the first to enter the shower completely naked. Water was running down her huge breasts, and she was simply luring Mason to join her. He was a virgin and could never even dream of such a thing. Becca kept calling Mason over and over again, and he asked her if her sister would be against it. But Becca was quick to reassure him, as she and Melanie often bathed together. Mason stood in front of the entrance and could not decide whether to go in. He quickly took off his clothes and said that if he did not come in, it would be a clear sign of disrespect, so he should not refuse. He had already approached Becca from behind and wanted to get comfortable. Looking at her tender, young, wet body, drool just rolled out of his mouth. But someone grabbed him by the hair from behind. It was Melanie, who was clearly not happy with his behavior. She asked rudely what else he was doing and pulled his head towards her. Mason said that he didn't really have time to see anything since he's had -8 vision since childhood. He can't even see anything in front of him. They got out of the bath and Mason immediately decided to change the subject of the conversation. So as not to test Melanie's patience, he began to get everything that he managed to convey from the real world. To ensure a balanced diet, he even took some fruit with him. Melanie immediately forgot about everything that had happened before because she had only seen bananas in pictures. Mason unwrapped one banana for her and told her she could eat it right now and not be embarrassed. He began to push the banana into Melanie's mouth. It went in slowly and quite tightly because she actively licked it with her tongue to make it easier to enter her mouth. Mason's thoughts were completely off the banana as he continued to slowly push it into Melanie's mouth. The banana was already quite wet, but in order to better and more clearly feel its taste, she continued to polish it with her tongue. Finally, a piece of banana broke off and remained in her mouth. She was filled with delight at its sweet taste. Mason closed his eyes and replayed the moment over and over in his mind. A few minutes later, Becca was already out of the shower and seeing so many products, she thought that she was in a dream. Would Mason really give it all to them? It was very expensive. But Mason said that he understood perfectly well the value of these things in this world, but he had promised to be generous to them if they would protect him. Melanie finally swallowed a piece of banana and thought that now she definitely had to keep her promise. Mason said that with his savings, he would only be able to stock up once, and he would also have to figure out a way to get the cores. Melanie asked him again why he needed money, because now it was just priceless paper. It was even inconvenient to wipe your ass with it. To which Mason replied that his trade was based on the exchange of rare metals, gold, silver, or something else in that spirit. Melanie looked around and walked away somewhere. She walked up to the table and took something out from under it. On the table where Mason was sitting, she placed several yellow bars that looked very much like gold. They sparkled like real gold bars. Mason reached out his hands to them and began to touch them. Are these really real gold bars? Melanie said she couldn't even remember what it was called, but the bars were square, so she decided to put them under the legs of the table to keep it from wobbling. If this one suits Mason, she has 5 or 6 more just like it under her desk. Mason even started to sweat a little when he saw so much gold in front of him, and Melanie opened a bag of chips and ate them with great pleasure, saying that they were not using it and he could take it all. It was already completely dark outside. Mason lay there and couldn't stop rejoicing that he was now truly rich. While he was sleeping, someone entered his room. Mason was completely oblivious to this, and his dreams were only about how he would now be able to spend his new wealth. However, he did not even suspect that all his dreams, like reality, could end in an instant. Becca was already standing in front of him with a knife raised up. She was already lowering the knife to stop Mason's dreams forever. However, her hand was stopped by Melanie. They quietly asked Becca what she was doing, what had come over her. Becca said that if they killed Mason right now, all his valuables would belong to them. Melanie said that they couldn't do that because he had saved them. If it weren't for the penicillin that he had given them for free, they would both have joined the company of the dead who wandered aimlessly through the streets. Becca reminded Melanie of how not long ago another guy managed to gain her trust and then betrayed them, telling their location to the bandits. Then everyone from their camp died. Did she really want a repeat? If Melanie hadn't stopped Mason, he would have lost his lustful eyes and his soul. Melanie insisted on her own because Mason had no reason to spend something as valuable as penicillin on them. Even if they sold everything they had, they wouldn't even earn 5 penicillin tablets, and Mason gave them a whole pack. He's definitely not a traitor. Suddenly, Mason himself interrupted their conversation and asked what they were whispering about. Becca, without thinking twice, jumped into his bed and told him that she wanted to sleep with him. Mason didn't even suspect her intentions and said that she didn't even need to ask about it, because he would gladly take her to his bed. Melanie wanted to save him from death and said that she also wanted to sleep with him. Mason couldn't even believe that he was so lucky and said that there was enough space for both girls. Mason's happiness knew no bounds. Who would have thought that 2 cute young girls would sleep with him, just because he brought them some food from the supermarket? Becca lay down, pressing herself tightly against him, and Melanie lay like a tin soldier, not sharing Becca's opinion at all. As soon as Mason fell asleep, Becca took a sickle from under the blanket. She wanted to finish Mason off unceremoniously with one blow. But Melanie kicked the sickle out of her hands. Melanie's foot not only knocked the sickle out of Becky's hands, but also hit Mason right in the stomach. He woke up again and asked why Melanie sat on top of him. Melanie said she wanted to sleep with him alone. In this case, she would be able to ensure his safety if someone suddenly wanted to attack him. Mason agreed with her, because safety is above all else. And yet the night passed without injuries for Mason. Becca sat down next to Mason and asked him how much he had evolved. Mason replied that he was just an ordinary handsome guy and had not evolved at all. Then Becca asked how he managed to climb the skyscraper. Mason immediately asked how she knew this. She said she had a pretty keen sense of smell, and when he came, she could smell everything. She started pretending to be a shy little girl and said that only the strongest evolved people could get out of that building alive, and how Mason did it. For now, he couldn't talk about the program, he could only lie. He said that he got a little lost yesterday, and only thanks to the revolver that Melanie gave him, he was able to survive. This meant that Mason was a good shot, and Melanie suggested that he try shooting at the range. Mason began shooting awkwardly, but missed the target even once. Melanie asked if he was aiming for the target. How could he shoot so badly? He even held the gun incorrectly. Melanie came up behind him, took his hand and offered to teach him how to shoot correctly. First, I needed to relax my shoulder. There was no need to keep the body in such a tense state. You need to stand still, and only now can you aim. And only now the shot. A hit, but not exactly on target. Mason was as happy as a child that he was able to hit the target. The program started and reported that an upgrade was available for ranged weapon proficiency. Now it became clear to Mason that there were other skills in the system, but points were needed for improvement. But he had none left. There was only one core from the Red Mutant, but these points were better spent on movement. Without thinking twice, Mason asked Melanie if there was a place where he could buy mutant cores. Melanie said that there is a place where you can exchange valuables for cannonballs. It is 2 kilometers from here. Mason was pleased to hear this and asked her to take him there. A few hours of traveling around the city and they were already there. Melanie knocked on the chain link fence and they entered immediately. One-eyed Alex was sitting there reading a newspaper. He was a local merchant who had almost everything your heart desires, but it didn't come cheap. As soon as they appeared in Alex's field of vision, he immediately pointed his gun at them. He didn't recognize Melanie at first and saw an unfamiliar Mason. She asked him if the old warrior was really afraid of zombies. Alex said that he wasn't afraid of zombies, he was more afraid of living people. Mason got straight to the point, asking if Alex could sell him the cores. Alex immediately asked what he would get for these cores. Mason placed 3 cans of preserves on the table. Alex couldn't believe his eyes. These were canned goods from the beginning of the 21st century. There weren't many left. Alex was just about to take them when Mason intercepted the canned goods from him and said that first he should show him the cannonballs. The one-eyed man took a drag on his cigarette and said that you couldn't fool him. At first glance he was a fool, but in fact he was smart. Mason said that at the very beginning of the conversation, Alex correctly noted that it is not zombies that you need to be afraid of, but people. So you should always be on guard. Alex told them to wait. He would bring everything they needed now. He was gone for a few minutes, and he put a bag of kernels on the table. He said that these were all the kernels he had, 11 in total. Alex said he would give 2 kernels for a can of expired meat, but Mason had prime meat, so he would give 4 kernels for 1 can, making 12. But he had 11, so he offered to make a deal now and give the rest later. Mason said he didn't have to pay anything back, and he would also give Alex a 4th jar on top. But he will have one request. Mason took out the ingot and asked Alex what kind of metal it was. The old man looked at the ingot and said that his eyesight was not the best, but it looked like gold. Great. Mason took the ingot back and said that the old man's eyesight was fine. An extra can of stew is a commission, because Alex probably knows a lot of people and asked to warn everyone so that they would look for gold for him, and in return, he would give them stew. Alex said that this trading plan sounded quite profitable, but he couldn't understand why he needed gold, since it had long since ceased to be profitable. Mason told Alex not to worry about it. The more gold, the better. Mason was finally able to recharge his charge, and he had 24 skill points. He immediately improved his ranged weapon skill by 4 levels, leaving him with only 9 skill points and the new ability he received, Doom Bullet. Mason decided to test his newly acquired skill. Now he shot confidently at the target. Every shot he fired was right on target. This is the real level of a skilled shooter. Mason asked the program what this new Fatal Bullet ability was. The program replied that this skill could be used for free only once a day. Mason agreed and asked how he could use this skill. The program said that first you need to say the cry, the fatal bullet, and then shoot. Mason asked what kind of stupid rules are these? Why does he have to scream when using this skill? He is not a superhero. The program said that people like to use the name of the technique before doing it. This method has been used for centuries according to human habits. Mason looked around to make sure no one was watching him. Like a real karateka, he began performing the technique, first standing in a stance. Now the gun goes up. The fatal bullet shouted out loudly, after which he immediately fired a shot. Both sisters watched Mason's pirouettes and they were not quite sure what kind of training he was doing. Mason looked into the distance. The bullet hit the neighboring building. He looked at the place where the bullet hit for several minutes, but nothing happened, and it was unclear what the difference was. As Mason walked inside the shelter, he was thinking that he should study his skills better. He immediately noticed how the girls were cleaning up and freeing up a room for him. He immediately noticed that Melanie was carrying 4 huge boxes herself and said that he was ready to help because they were incredibly heavy. Melanie said that she didn't need help because for the evolved, such weight was not a problem at all. Mason immediately asked if all the evolved ones were so incredibly strong. Almost all of them, Melanie answered. At least they are much stronger than ordinary survivors, but there are very few who were able to evolve. Mason was fired up by the idea and asked what it would take to become evolved. Melanie thought for a moment and said there were 3 ways to do this. The first way is to survive the infection that entered the blood after a bite. But there were many such cases during the outbreak of the virus. But now you won't find anything like that. The second way was to swallow the core, and if you didn't get blown up, there was a 10% chance you would become evolved. The third method requires evolution potions. She heard that large organizations have such potions. Here it is. Mason was delighted, because he could exchange a lot of food for such potions. Melanie said that she could take him to try his luck in the unification of the buildings of the mainland. They are not like in the 17th camp. They need benefit, so they might be able to exchange such potions. Mason completely agreed with her and said that they were moving out tomorrow. A new sunny day has arrived. They were already leaving, and Mason asked why Becca wasn't coming with them. And lately he began to think that she was looking at him strangely, but Melanie reassured him, saying that she was looking at him like that because of her poor eyesight. They walked down the street, and Mason noticed that there were more and more zombies near the base. Melanie said that it would take time to clear the area of them. Meanwhile, Becca was shooting at the target. She was angry that Melanie wouldn't let her kill Mason. At some point, the neighboring building began to collapse. She looked at this spectacle with surprise, but why it fell apart like a house of cards was not clear. They moved further and further along the city streets. There were a huge number of zombies there. It was necessary to act quietly so as not to attract the attention of the mutants and the rest of the horde. At some point, they came to a garage. Mason had not been here before. Melanie opened the garage where a good armored car was parked. She said that she had set up another supply point in this garage just in case. Then they would go by car, and in about 2 hours they would arrive at the camp of the Association of Builders of the Mainland. They were driving fast on the highway and some zombies were trying to catch up with them. Mason warned Melanie that there were several zombies chasing them, but Melanie didn't care. She was sure that they would lose them. Melanie asked if Mason was sure of his decision, because even if he used the highest level potion, there was a chance that he would die. Mason said he wasn't sure, but the main purpose of their trip was to exchange goods. First, they needed to see what they had to trade. According to Melanie, this camp was also some kind of trading organization, but there is no guarantee that they will not be killed and all the goods will not be taken. So you need to trade a little at first, and then watch their reaction. While Mason was filled with thoughts about trading, a zombie appeared right in front of his face. It was a whole group of red zombies that were quickly catching up with their car. Melanie told him to quickly get his gun out and shoot. With their powerful, sharp hands, the zombies went through the car like a sieve. Mason kept shooting but couldn't hit even one zombie. He didn't understand what the problem was. He was a skilled shooter. Melanie said that they were super fast red zombies that could dodge bullets. Melanie told Mason to get behind the wheel and drive as fast as he could. They quickly changed and Melanie was already on the roof of the car. The zombie rushed at her, and she rushed at the zombie, but she still had her saw in her hands. After that meeting, the zombie simply fell apart in half. However, there were a lot of mutants, and this was clearly not going to be an easy walk. Melanie jumped off the car, cutting another mutant in half. She fell onto the asphalt after sliding several meters on her back. However, this was just what the mutants were waiting for. It was incredibly difficult to stand up to such a number of powerful mutants. Melanie began to realize that her chances of being wounded were 0, and before the final attack, she simply closed her eyes. But as soon as she opened them, she saw Mason in front of her. He stood with a pistol in his hands and all the red mutants were lying around them. It was of course very dangerous. One more moment and I would not have made it in time, Mason said. He immediately saw that Melanie had fallen from the roof of the car and the creatures were rushing at her. Mason immediately stopped the car and rushed to help. He had a well-developed climbing skill, which gave him the ability to develop enormous speed. And if these zombies could easily dodge bullets, then what can they do if a gun is in their face? This was the only way to kill several zombies at once. Melanie realized that Mason was strong. He managed to kill several red zombies at once. His strength was equal to the first level of the evolved one. At this time, Mason, as a child, began to collect cores from mutants, saying that now he would be able to improve his abilities. He was looking for the cores but couldn't find them. Melanie stopped him. She asked him to look around. Thousands of zombies were moving towards them from all sides. But where did so many of them come from? They were probably attracted by the shots. They clearly needed to leave there as quickly as possible. They both quickly ran to the car, shooting back at the approaching zombies. Mason kept shooting, but Melanie asked him to save his bullets. There weren't enough of them to kill everyone anyway. However, they couldn't drive now either. The car was simply stuck in a huge horde of dead, stinking zombies, ready to die for a piece of fresh human flesh. The entire car was surrounded by an incredible number of zombies who wanted only one thing: to get the flesh of the people inside. Mason asked Melanie how many bullets she had left, to which she replied that she didn't have as many as she wanted. The guy took the magazines out of the gun, and after looking, it turned out that he only had 10 bullets left. This crowd cannot be taken down with such a quantity of bullets. In such conditions, the guy can only use a fatal bullet. Previously, the system said that the free fatal bullet could only be used once a day. The guy was worried because he didn't know for sure if he would be able to get that fatal bullet. As it turned out, when I first bought the fatal bullet, it cost 1 skill point for each shot, after which I didn't think twice and bought 7 shots. The gun sparkled with purple rays, which meant that the guy had acquired bullets. Mason decided that he would leave the remaining 2 skill points for transfer. If 8 shots did not help, then he would move to his own time. Well, a split second later he remembered that he was not alone in the car. Melanie was next to him, and she definitely couldn't get out of this hell alone. After all, she would simply die here. She would not be able to physically cope with this crowd of zombies alone. At this time, the girl said that the car was strong. For some time, they would definitely not be able to penetrate. The girl got furious because she told him to save bullets. But in the end, the guy spent all the bullets, and the zombies didn't really decrease, but at that moment, the guy just laughed at the girl's words. Melanie said that you should always leave at least 1 bullet just in case, because it might come in handy. But Mason couldn't understand the girl's words because how could 1 bullet be of any use? The girl began to tell that she always saves the last bullet. She wouldn't want to let these creatures bite her and then turn into a zombie. The last bullet should be left for yourself. In this world, death is at every step. The girl has long been ready to die at any moment. She just wouldn't want her death to be so sad, so she advises the guy to always leave at least 1 bullet. The guy didn't really react to the girl's words, but just looked at her nervously. No effect. Mason fired 7 fatal bullets, but nothing special happened. The zombies remained outside, and in addition, there were more and more of them. At this time, the zombies continued to break into the car, hoping to feast on human flesh. After some time, raindrops began to fall on the zombie's head. It started raining. At least the boy and girl won't have to worry about dying of thirst. Now they can only pray that there are other people nearby who can distract the zombies. But there are definitely no such kind people. It's clear that the zombies didn't care about this rain. The guy noticed that a stench suddenly started. But as it turned out, the rotten meat on the zombie's body gets wet from the water. There is always such a stench during the rain. As it turned out, the partners came up with a cunning plan. They placed buckets under the roof of the car to collect water. The buckets were already full and they needed to patch up the hole in the roof. It was raining quite heavily. The girl hadn't seen anything like it for a long time. If it continued for another day, they might see something interesting. The guy couldn't understand what the girl meant by the word interesting. Zombies themselves are immortal, but water can wash them away. So right now they are watching the zombies melt before their eyes. When water hits them, their skin swells, making it seem as if they are living people again. However, this was only temporary. At this time, the rain was not going to stop. On the contrary, dark, thick clouds with rain were gathering around the car and a crowd of zombies. They continue to absorb water, the skin continues to swell. To such an extent that at some point it can't take it anymore and bursts. The zombies still won't die from this. They'll just look a little more interesting. The guy asked the girl to stop, because from her story and that smell, he would definitely throw up. And then they would both be uncomfortable sitting in the car. But in any case, it was better to sit in the car like this than outside with a crowd of zombies. The girl asked the guy to look out the window. The girl noticed that all the zombies on the outside began to look more like people. This is indeed true. Almost all the zombies had all the outlines and characteristics of a person. After one zombie, who was a girl, leaned towards the mirror, the girl noticed that she looked the same age as she was. The girl would still be alive if the world were normal. In Melanie's words, there was a sense of resentment and sadness for what happened to this world, and specifically to this girl. But the girl's reasoning was interrupted by Mason, who asked her what she would do if the world were normal. The girl was surprised by such a sudden and at the same time difficult question. The girl didn't think much about it. If there were no zombies, if the world was normal, then she would. She would have liked to become a pastry chef, but she felt it wasn't really suited to her. Well, the guy had a different opinion. He said that such a profession would suit her. It's not strange because the guy knew better because he lived and can live in a normal world. A few seconds later, a powerful bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, almost illuminating the entire clearing where the girl and boy were. The guy can't leave Melanie, there has to be another way. The guy decided that he would gain strength during the day, and then try to use the climbing ability to escape with Melanie right over the heads of these zombies. A split second later, the partners' faces were covered by a powerful flash of lightning, which clearly surprised them a little. What a dense flash. This area was always dry, the girl had never seen such weather here. But the lightning was not going to stop. On the contrary, it took on an unnatural appearance and was directed straight at the car with the girl and the guy. The flash was so bright that the main characters even shielded themselves from it. After a few seconds, she finally reached her target and hit the car. A moment later, dozens, if not hundreds, of zombies were struck down by the same lightning, causing them to fly off in all directions. After the guy opened his eyes, he saw dead zombies lying in front of him. Such a picture clearly amazed the guy almost to the point of losing consciousness. And, oddly enough, the zombies were all dead from such a powerful discharge of electricity. The girl and the guy still couldn't believe what had just happened, because it was the first time they saw all the zombies around them killed by one lightning strike. Well, even though the zombies were dead, the partner had to clear the road of zombies, otherwise the car wouldn't be able to pass. By the time they finished cleaning, it was already clear. They were probably still a little shocked by what had happened. The guy was indescribably happy that they were able to survive under such circumstances, but the girl was also incredibly happy. At this time, they reached some huge gates. A man at the post above told his partner that a car was approaching and that he needed to report it to the guard, after which the partner went to report it. Meanwhile, the guard himself was sleeping soundly, along with two gorgeous girls, and against the backdrop of all this, the man was shouting for the guard to wake up because the car was at the gate. The guard reluctantly went outside, adjusting his pants, and complained about the person who had arrived so early. The man asked permission to find out everything. Opening a small gap in the gate, the man told everyone to get out of the car. The main characters approached the gate. The man said that he had not seen them before and asked where they were coming from, also adding whether they were looking for shelter. Mason said that they were traders and had come to exchange very valuable things, and the girl simply watched and remained silent. The guard, at this time, having thrown his coat over himself, told them to get the goods, and he would look at it. The man gave the guard the boy's goods in exchange. He looked with interest at the canned food that the guy brought. He unpacked the goods with the hope of trying them out, but the girl was outraged by the man's behavior because they had not yet received anything in return. She could not understand why he was already opening it. But Mason interrupted the girl and said that it was okay. The man would just try the product. He asked her to try it quickly and tell him how he liked it. The man said that the guy was smarter than he seemed. The man swallowed a juicy piece of meat, while one of the men present looked at all this and was clearly hungry. The man decided to try it again. He raised the spoon to his mouth and took a swallow. At this time, the men standing nearby asked him how it tasted and choked on their saliva, because they were not just hungry but most likely dying of hunger. The guy took another spoon. The girl was again outraged by the guy's behavior. She thought that was enough, because he was close to eating the whole jar. The man didn't understand what it was. He took a couple of spoons, and it was already finished. He said that he couldn't even taste the product. But the guy said that it was okay. He had more, and held out the can so that the man could try it. A few minutes later, several empty cans were lying on the table, containing absolutely nothing at all. The girl was furious about this. Because the man had already eaten 8 cans, she asked if he knew how many good things they could exchange for them. With a bloated belly, the guy reported that he had eaten quite a lot, after which he added that he was leaving the broth for the men standing nearby. A split second later, they began to fight, not literally, for this broth, which looked very strange and ridiculous from the outside. The man said that the canned food was quite tasty. He ordered the mayor of the city to be notified about the guy and girl, after which the man ordered him to follow him, after which he led them to the estate, where there were a lot of people. It felt like this place did not feel the zombies outside. At this time, Someone asked whether people did not want to look. Someone said that they had the highest quality goods. Mason asked if there were people living in these houses, to which he was told that they were all refugees, whom the mayor of the city had warmly welcomed. If it were not for him, then sooner or later they would all have become victims of the zombies. A man fell right to the floor in front of the heroes. As it turned out, he didn't just fall down. He was beaten by some guy who accused him of stealing medicine and promised that he would get it from him now. As it turned out, this someone was a girl with red hair who asked to spare her and said that she would not steal anything else. Mason immediately ran up to the guy who was beating the girl and asked him to go easy, so that they could discuss everything calmly. He couldn't understand why he was using his hands. But the man was furious and asked the guy if he even knew what she had done. He said that the girl had stolen medicine from the warehouse. Medicine is more important to them than food. Unauthorized use of medicine is punishable by death. All it takes is for the head of the city to order it, and they will not leave a single living place on the girl. The man said that the girl dared to steal so much, but it was good that he managed to catch her. He asked her where she hid the medicine and ordered her to give it back quickly. The man told the boy that people from the outside world should not worry about this. The thief would be given an appropriate sentence, after which he added that they should follow him further. After which the man dragged the girl with him into the courtroom. The man was interested in what punishment the girl would receive in court. The man said that the mayor was busy today, so he would not be able to receive them. There was a guest room on the second floor. The man handed over the key and said that the mayor would receive them tomorrow. The next day arrived. An elderly woman walked around the estate and asked if people had seen her granddaughter. After the grandmother asked the man again whether he had definitely not seen her, he aggressively told her to get lost, and also added that he was late for work in the mine. After which the grandmother approached some stranger and began to report that her granddaughter had red hair, a small braid, and also added that she had been missing since yesterday evening. Mason noted that the girl they saw yesterday was probably her granddaughter, but the man told the guy not to worry because she would be informed about everything. But Mason decided not to wait and went up to the grandmother, after which he told her that her granddaughter had stolen the medicine. So now she was in the courthouse and advised her to ask there. From the expression on the man's face, it was clear that he was slightly unhappy about this. The grandmother began to blame herself, arguing that the girl had stolen the medicine to cure her illness, and if anyone needed to be taken into custody, it was her. She believed that since she had taken these medicines, she should be the one to be tried. But the guy's dialogue was interrupted by a man who said that they needed to go. Otherwise, they would be late for a meeting with the mayor. The man walked into the building and announced in his head that the merchant named Mason had arrived. At this time, the chief was eating and told him to come in. Entering the room, the guy saw 5 guards in front of him, the head of the city, and 2 women sitting near the head while he was eating. The guy said that he was that very merchant. The man said that his trading principle is that he only exchanges with people he knows. But according to the security, the canned goods that the guy brought were very good. The chief asked if this was really true. Mason said that he also has fresh canned meat, and everyone who hasn't tried it liked it. He added that the head of the company could try it too. A few seconds later, canned food was brought to the chief on a tray. He opened one of the valuable jars, after which he threw in the entire can at once, and not like the man on the post did, who ate it in small pieces with a spoon. The head began to chew. Suddenly, he instantly grabbed all the canned goods at once, which could not help but surprise everyone present. After which he squeezed the canned food and began to eat it, to be honest, like some kind of pig. After the man chewed, he said that it was simply delicious. This meat was tens of thousands of times better than what he usually eats. He asked how many more cans the guy had. He takes everything and gives in exchange whatever he wants. It goes without saying that the guy was happy with this news and also added that the boss knows a lot about the product. The man insisted that the boy say what he wanted to receive in return. The guy was brief. He said that he needed cores, an evolution potion, and also gold. But the boss clearly didn't understand what gold was, after which a subordinate ran up to him and began to explain what gold actually was. A few seconds later, the man with a smile on his face said that of course he would have gold, because in this world it is one of the most unnecessary things. The chief ordered the man to go with the guy to the warehouse, pick up the goods and collect for him what they give in return. But the guy interrupted the leader and said that he had one more request. It is clear that the boss did not understand what request the guy was talking about. Mason started to tell that yesterday a girl stole medicine from his warehouse. Now she is in the courthouse. The guy said that he will give him 3 times more medicine as compensation for the damages. He only asked to let her go. The boss asked his subordinate if this was really true, to which he told what had happened, and also added that the thief had already been taken into custody and the judge had sentenced her to prison. The chief thought, since the guy is ready to compensate their losses threefold, then the chief remains in the black. After the deal is completed, the guard will take the guy to the courthouse to free the girl. The guy thanked the chief. The subordinate gave the guy a box and said that it contained what he asked for in exchange for the goods in an equivalent amount: 10 gold bars, 100 cores, and 2 evolution potions. Now the guy has hundreds of cores, and he can upgrade a bunch of abilities, but now the first thing he needs to do is go to his time and exchange these ingots for money. Even though the guy doesn't know how much it all costs, he's definitely rich now. The man also gave the guy a leaflet and said that there was an order for the girl's release, and he also added that he would take the guy to the courthouse. But the guy couldn't understand where Melanie was. He suspected that she was already waiting for him at the entrance. And at this time, people gathered in the square and looked at something very worriedly, and fear was visible in their eyes. The bloody feet were visible to everyone present. You could tell from the people that they were truly scared. The guy couldn't understand why there were so many people at the entrance to the courthouse. At this time, the man tried to somehow get through among these people. He believed that the people had nothing to do. Apparently, they were given little work in the mine. He promised that tomorrow he would definitely tell the head to add more hours to their work. But some voice said that there was no need to drive anyone away. After some stranger said that it was he who told the people to come, the man immediately fell silent and fell into a slight stupor. The stranger said that let the people see what awaits them. Whoever decides to illegally appropriate the property of the head of the city, everyone present should learn a lesson. The lower humans, who are not part of the evolved, can survive in their world only thanks to the generous help of the city's leader. Everything in the city belongs to the head. Using anything without permission is a crime and is also punishable by death. And at this time, the same grandmother who was looking for her granddaughter was crying with all her might. Intuitively, the guy guessed that the body in the square was the same girl who stole the medicine. The guy instantly became enraged by what he saw and by the realization of who was in front of him. At this time, the grandmother did not stop writhing from incredible pain inside. The guy was even more furious. He couldn't understand what kind of jokes the stranger was telling. He was at the peak of his anger. He was ready to tear apart everyone and everything in this square. Mason approached the stranger and grabbed him by the jacket, after which he asked if human life really meant nothing to him, and also added that the girl stole the medicine to cure a loved one. That's all. The stranger said that he was seeing the guy for the first time. He must be a merchant living outside. After which the stranger's patience ran out and he grabbed the guy by the hand. He twisted the guy's arm. It immediately twisted and pain rushed through Mason's body. A split second later, the stranger dislocated the guy's arm, which couldn't help but hurt. His face twisted in pain, but he endured it as best he could. The stranger said that since the guy was not local, he would forgive him for the first time. As it turned out, this stranger was the supreme judge. The man who was introduced to the guy said that he was indeed a merchant who had come to them from outside. He was here for the first time, so he did not know the rules. He asked to forgive him. 2 more soldiers approached them, and the Chief Justice asked Mason if the girl had come with him. The guy saw a tied-up girl in front of him. Fear was visible in her eyes because she didn't know what would happen to her next. The hero was alarmed and a little scared. He asked what they did to the girl. The Chief Justice began to explain that the girl had broken into the prison, but he had managed to catch her in time before she could do anything. It seems that the girl is very angry at the Chief Justice for ordering the girl to be killed, so he is wondering whether to let her go free. After some thought, the Chief Justice said that he believed she should simply be killed. But the man asked the Chief Judge to have mercy, because the boy and girl had brought the chief a rather worthy treat. If he killed these merchants, he would no longer be able to enjoy such delicacies. But the man said that in that case it would be enough to leave only one alive. The hero's patience snapped. He asked the system to use all cores for charging. The system reported that these cores would be enough for 3 upgrades, after which the guy said that he wanted an upgrade. The improvement is complete, the level is currently 7, but the system also detected a physical injury on the guy. The cost of regeneration is 50 skill points. After the system asked if the guy wants to use skill points for treatment, he firmly and decisively answered yes. He only has 44 skill points left. The guy thought that the judge would definitely kill Melanie since he managed to catch her so easily. He had more than enough strength. The fatal bullet could possibly help finish him off. But then all these people would be hit, which the guy clearly didn't want. Now the best solution is to use super speed to snatch their girlfriend from them and escape from this city. The guy has risen 3 levels. The body also feels new strength. He believes that this is enough to escape. He asked the system to activate the ability of high-speed climbing, after which, at super speed, he approached the girl to pick her up. All this time, the judge had a very cool and confident face. The guy snatched the men's girlfriend from him in a split second, thereby dropping them to the floor and ran away. The guy didn't hide his joy at what he had just done and told Melanie that they would be out of here in a jiffy. Mason easily jumped over the building, which looked more like a tower, thereby getting out of the city. The guy liked the fact that he could use his power even longer. The hero told the girl not to worry because they would soon be outside. And after a few seconds, the guy had already jumped over the huge wall around the city. The jump was so high that they stayed in the air for several tens of seconds. The guy landed on the ground in time. Because he was just at the limit, he thinks that they are already far away, and they will not be able to track them down. Having come to her senses, the girl immediately began to apologize to Mason, arguing that she had caused him problems. But the guy at that time did not really listen to her, but only thought about how dangerous it was. Then Mason asked the girl not to say that. She did everything right. It was his fault that he didn't take care of everything earlier. He just wasted so much time. But who could have known that they would act so quickly? Melanie thought that it was her fault because she was too weak. If only she could buy a little time. The boy asked if this supreme judge was strong, to which the girl replied that he must be a 5th degree evolved one. Well, since the guy wasn't really in the know, he asked, "Is the 5th degree the most powerful force?" Melanie confirmed the guy's words. All evolved ones start from the 1st degree, and it is very difficult to move to the next level. It took her 10 years to reach the 3rd degree. Each camp has high-level evolved who are responsible for security, but 5th level evolved are rare. It is said that a 10th level evolved is so strong that it can destroy an entire city with one blow. The guy didn't think that there were people with such phenomenal power, and he thought that he could rule this world since he had a system. And at this time, the same judge, whose intentions were clearly not the best, was approaching his partners. Melanie immediately warned the guy, but the referee was too fast, and the guy didn't have time to react, after which the man delivered a powerful blow from his knee straight to his stomach. The man began to beat the guy almost to death. His blows were not only strong but also accurate. He aimed straight at the guy's face. And the girl at this time could not do anything. She just shouted the guy's name. Holding the boy's bloody head in front of him, the man angrily asked if he had given them permission to leave. Mason was lying on the ground covered in blood. The girl nevertheless decided to somehow help the guy and began to approach the judge. As expected, the judge was able to react quickly to this and hit her right in the stomach. A few seconds later, the man was holding Melanie by the throat, and at that moment she was begging him to let go. As it turned out, the guy was conscious and began to reach into his pocket for the potion. After he got the medicine, he drank it immediately. Turning around, the judge saw Mason drinking the potion, which surprised him. Unimaginable things started happening to the guy. He dropped the flask with the potion from his hands. Melanie couldn't believe he wasted the potion at that moment. But the judge just laughed at this because he was sure that it wouldn't help the guy in any way. After a few seconds, he started laughing even harder. The guy's stomach suddenly twisted. He writhed in incredible, indescribable pain due to the fact that he drank the potion. The man said that he had never met people dumber. He asked the girl if her boyfriend really thought that he would evolve and be able to defeat him. Even if the guy manages to evolve, in the eyes of the man, he will just be a slightly stronger bug. In the judge's opinion, the guy will die soon anyway. Why exhaust himself even more? Is it really better to take a mortal risk and try to win? The guy is like a pathetic insect who is about to die, but still tries to fight for life. This is a really interesting case. At the moment when the guy was writhing in pain, he began to remember his past, how he stood in front of some man who scolded him for always getting into fights. The man was already tired of repeating to the guy that he needs to get along with classmates. But the hero said that if he is offended, he will always fight back. He remembers how someone hit him right in the face. Most likely it was his dad, who was furious because he told him to stop fighting at school. He ordered his son to stop embarrassing him. The boy explained that he was teased because he didn't have a mother. The man simply remained silent at this time, as if he had not heard anything, sipping his beer. He also recalled how his boss once told him that he could not come to work from tomorrow, but the guy could not understand what was going on and what he did wrong. But the director said that there was nothing strange about the boss inviting an employee for a cup of coffee. He couldn't understand why the guy was meddling in their affairs. It would be better for the guy to study properly. Mason also recalled how he once walked down a dark street with his things. At that time, he saw some hooligans on the street pestering his then not-yet girlfriend Emma. Mason came up behind them at this time and asked what they were doing there. One of the hooligans told the guy to mind his own business and then pushed him away. A few minutes after the fight, the hero, all beaten and scratched, was holding the bully's leg, and the latter was telling him to let him go. They thought he was like a mad dog, and one of them suggested leaving here. Otherwise, the police would come running. The hooligan's last words were that the boy should never be seen again, after which the girl ran up to him and thanked him for helping her. She said that she would take him to the hospital. It seemed that he had serious wounds, but he said that there was nothing serious. They were just scratches. In the end, the guy only told Emma to hurry home because this area is not safe. The girl ran up to him and stopped him. She noted that he had a suitcase and therefore had nowhere to live. She also added that her family was just giving him an apartment and suggested that he come to them. Mason nevertheless agreed to the girl's proposal, and a few minutes later he was already sitting at the table in the apartment and eating his fill of a variety of food. The girl was clearly glad that the guy came to her, and you could tell from the guy that he was happy. Meanwhile, the man switched from Melanie to Mason and placed his foot on his hand. The judge called the guy a half-dead dog. He believed that he apparently failed to evolve. But at this time, the guy was somewhere in an indescribable place. And the monotonous voice of the system reported that soon the guy would completely lose his mind. Because he was stuck in a loop, and his endless memories, the chances of evolving with the help of a level 2 potion were too small. Apparently, for this candidate it was all over. His data were not the most outstanding anyway. Now it remained to find a new candidate. All their numerous attempts were unsuccessful. Perhaps they were simply destined to die. Then Emma asked Mason if he liked it, to which he replied that it was even good. With the girl's culinary skills, she could open her own restaurant. Emma will always be happy to cook for a guy, if only he asks about it. These words made the guy feel a little embarrassed. The girl remembered that during the day she had taken a cake from a popular store nearby and stood at the table to bring it. She began to cut him a piece, telling him to try it. He said that it was very tasty. The girl heard that their pastry chefs were winners of an international award. Meanwhile, Mason remembered that Melanie had told him that she wanted to become a pastry chef, but she thought it wasn't really right for her. The hero became sharply alert in his memories. Emma couldn't understand what had happened to the guy, because a second ago he had been happy, but now he seemed to have fallen into a stupor. Mason replied that it felt like he had forgotten something and couldn't remember it. And at that time, the judge grabbed the girl by the shoulder. She told him if he wanted to kill her, then let him kill her now and not waste time. But he replied that he would not kill her. They would torture her if there was not a single traitor of things that the head of the city liked left. Besides, in the man's opinion, the girl has a cute face. You can cut off her limbs and give her to the boss to have fun. Such words clearly did not surprise the girl, but she was simply perplexed. At this time, the man was grabbed by the leg by a guy who was still able to evolve. Mason was the most alive of all, with a very strong energy emanating from him. The man clearly didn't expect this. The guy ordered the judge to stop, after which he grabbed him by the coat and, with his help, began to climb up towards the man. A split second later, the guy delivered a powerful blow to the man right in the jaw. The blow was of indescribably powerful force, and in addition to this, it is very accurate. The guy's strength was so strong that the man literally punched the ground with his face. The girl was clearly happy that Mason did not die, and was even able to save her. The man lay unconscious and covered in blood in the rubble, and at that time the guy with bloody fists was kneeling over him. The hero still managed to evolve, as I said earlier. He wiped the blood from his face with his hand. With a joyful expression on her face, the girl said that she already thought that the guy had died. But he just laughed at this and added that it was not so easy to kill him. But the joy did not last long. The lying man plunged his hand into the guy, thereby piercing him through and through. Melanie clearly didn't expect this. It was clear from her look that she was very scared because of the guy. And she wasn't just worried, but scared. After the man was able to get up, he moved the guy closer to him while continuing to keep his hand on his chest. Mocking the hero, he congratulated him on his successful evolution. And the man, in principle as always, had a cold-blooded and confident look. Even though he succeeded, he was only at the first stage of evolution. The judge asked if the guy really thought that this was enough to defeat him. Mason gritted his teeth in anger. It was clear that he was preparing for something indescribably powerful. What exactly happened was that after a few seconds, the guy began to glow yellow. The man could not understand what had just happened to the hero. It was clear from his look that for the first time he was truly scared. The shining hero began to levitate in the air. The man was still perplexed by what he saw. The judge couldn't believe it because it was impossible. This is the energy of the golden core. It's impossible. Only those who have evolved to the 10th level can do this. The man realized that things wouldn't go this way. He definitely wouldn't be able to defeat him if he really had evolved to the 10th level. The judge was going to run away from here as fast as he could, which is exactly what he did a split second later. He really ran as fast as he could because he didn't want to be killed at the hands of a guy he had recently considered a mere weakling. The guy had just evolved. The man couldn't understand how he managed to use the energy of the golden core, but this one, without a doubt, looks just like that time. At this time, Mason was already completely covered in this yellow glow and pointed his hand straight in the direction of the moving man. After the hero pointed his finger in the direction of the man, it glowed bright yellow and some kind of magic ball formed. But the judge did not suspect anything at that moment, because he was only thinking about how to save himself. Yellow rushed through the middle of the forest with more energy. He shot out everything that he encountered on his way. A few seconds later, the beam reached the man himself. A powerful force tore off half of his body. The beam left a huge crater behind it. This battle will definitely go down in history. And at this time, the head felt something. He felt the energy of some familiar person 5 kilometers from here. Could it be that someone strong was heading to his city? At this time, in the 17th camp, the leader also sensed something. In the Rock Climbers Aid Union, 2 girls also sensed this incredible power. And at that moment, the guy, exhausted, began to fall to the floor. Melanie immediately ran up to him and told the guy to hold on, also adding that she would bandage his wounds. A few seconds later, it turned out that the guy's wound was too big, and the girl couldn't stop the bleeding. But suddenly, the guy's body seemed to be covered with some kind of shield. The girl was surprised by what she saw because the blood suddenly stopped. She picked the guy up and told him that he had to hold on, that she would take him to the doctor now, and then they went to the doctor. Meanwhile, the chief rushed to the scene of the incident, where he felt the energy. When he arrived at the place, strangely enough, he saw nothing, and the energy also disappeared suddenly. The leader couldn't understand why such a strong evolved suddenly entered the battle not far from his city. He hoped that he didn't come for his soul. Although if you think about it, he is a simple businessman, so he couldn't cross the path of the evolved of the 4th stage and above. Meanwhile, the heroes arrived at an abandoned warehouse. The girl started knocking loudly on the door and shouting for it to be opened quickly. She kicked the door down, thereby pushing away the girl standing in front of the door. The stranger fell and hit herself. She was clearly not happy with what the girl did. She said that Melanie would pay for the new door herself. But Melanie said that there was no time to chat now, and she told the doctor to help her cure the guy faster. Melanie showed that she was very worried. The doctor ordered the hero to be put on the bed to check everything thoroughly. Melanie asked the girl what was wrong with the guy, to which she replied that his vital signs were very strange. She couldn't say that everything was bad, but she couldn't say the opposite either. In any case, first he needed to bandage his wounds well. X-rays showed that in the places where they were stored, his organs were covered with some kind of gold film. One could say that this metal saved his life. Miracles. The girl had never seen such a method of treating wounds. Melanie asked if everything was okay with the guy, to which she was told that the doctor could not say for sure. After all, it was very strange. Let the guy stay here for a couple of days. She would observe him. At this time, somewhere in an alley, 3 men were standing and listening to a 4th man tell them to punch him a couple of times. As it turned out, it was their boss. They couldn't understand what he was talking about because, after all, he was their boss. As it turned out, it was Logan, asking his subordinates if they really didn't want to hit him once, since they always got it from him. He told them not to be afraid. He would not remind them of this. They could beat him calmly. After which the guys, without thinking for long, began to beat their boss almost to death. Logan was clearly unhappy with this, because they didn't doubt it for even a minute, even though he promised them not to mention it. But he had completely different plans. At this time, the guy knocked on the door. As it turned out, Logan was knocking on the door of that very doctor. Now it is clear why he asked to beat him. He came to the doctor and said that he was injured again, and asked her to heal him quickly. The girl was surprised, because this was already the 3rd time in a month. The guy had started getting wounded too often, to which he replied that in their profession it couldn't be any other way. Hearing some sounds outside, Melanie went out to see who had come. She instantly remembered how Logan had brought the gun to Mason's head, while telling the girl how many of his brothers she had killed. Logan promised that the next time they met, he would cut her into pieces and feed her to the zombies to avenge his brothers. The girl couldn't understand what he was doing here, because the 17th camp should have its own infirmary. If Logan finds out they're here, he'll definitely call his men and surround them. We need to get away before he lets the camp know about them. When Logan was about to enter the room with the girl and the guy, the doctor stopped him and said that there was already a patient in this room, and told him to follow her, and she would treat him early. Entering Mason's room, the doctor was very surprised by what the girl was doing. She said that the guy couldn't move now and ordered her to quickly put him back down. But the girl didn't listen to her and said that they needed to get out of here. Melanie heard someone open the door to the room. Oddly enough, it was Logan himself who was looking ominously at them. He instantly pulled out his pistol and was ready to fire. He pointed the gun at the girl and the boy. At this time, the doctor attacked him, telling him what he was doing, and Melanie grabbed the guy by the back and started to run away. Logan told the doctor that these two killed a dozen of his guys. He promised them that he would kill them. He added that he had already notified the camp. They definitely wouldn't be able to leave, and he also added that he would skin them. But the doctor interrupted him and said that there would be no murders in her hospital because he was her patient. If the guy lays a finger on them, he won't be able to be treated by her anymore. The girl was serious. She would not allow anyone to touch her patients. With his head down, the guy said that he would not touch her patients, but also asked if it was okay to touch non-patients. The evil guy said that they can live here for a couple of days. He orders his people to surround the building. He promises them that as soon as they leave the hospital, there will be no more dead people. At this time, the guy's mind was transferred somewhere in the system. He was congratulated on the successful transition to the first stage of evolution. He was surprised because he thought he was dead. The system reported that he spent 3 years of his life to concentrate his power and defeat the 5th degree evolver. It is clear that the guy could not understand what 3 years of life the system was talking about. The system reported that during the loss of consciousness, the guy relied on his gift of concentration and was able to defeat the enemy. But even for this, years of his life were spent. Who would have thought that it is possible to evolve with the help of one's own willpower? But he was underestimated. The guy could not understand who was saying this all the time. The guy asked to answer his question, who they were, and why they gave him this system. They hoped that the guy would be able to go to the end. When he reached the finish line, they would definitely meet. The doctor was surprised because in just 1 day, all his wounds had healed. Even if we take into account the ability of the evolved generation, she had never seen such a quick recovery. But Melanie couldn't understand why the guy wouldn't wake up. The doctor thought that he would wake up very soon. Perhaps he needed a little stimulation, after which she literally punched him in the balls. As expected, the guy immediately woke up feeling such severe pain. The girl laughed at this, and apparently the guy is already much better. He looks like he's full of energy. Melanie coughed demonstratively and told the guy to get dressed. While the guy was getting dressed, the girl reported what had happened while he was unconscious with Logan. The 17th camp had already surrounded the building. She began to tell him that in the old days, she could easily deal with their boss, who was at the 3rd stage of evolution. But that high judge kicked her, damaging her internal organs. So yesterday, she couldn't take any risks. Hearing this, the guy became furious and said that he would deal with them now. The girl said that she was going with a guy, but he objected, arguing that she needed to heal her wounds. Now he can deal with this bunch of losers in one fell swoop because he is completely healed and full of strength. At this time, the boss was asked why they couldn't just burst in there and finish off those two, to which he replied that it wasn't possible because he had made a promise to the doctor, so they couldn't break it. One of the subordinates told the boss that at the supply point they said that today the doctor will go to them to buy medicine. They can wait for a moment, get inside and finish them off, and then just say that they left the infirmary themselves. Then the doctor will not tell Logan anything. It was obvious that the guy liked this plan. That's exactly what he was planning to do. They decided to kill the guy, take the girl alive. One of the subordinates asked the boss whether he was not flirting with the doctor, or whether he decided to have fun with another girl. At which the guy simply laughed and said that the most important thing was that the doctor did not find out about anything. A few seconds later, the crowd of people saw the silhouette of a man in front of them. The guy was surprised at who was standing in front of them. Oddly enough, it was Mason himself who told you not to waste your energy walking, because he himself came to them. Logan immediately ordered his boyfriend to kill Mason. The guy again began to glow with some kind of yellow radiance. The guy was determined. He wanted to finish them off once and for all. The digital panel was activated. A crowd of people headed towards the guy, hoping that they could easily finish him off. This entire crowd of people consisted of those who had evolved to the initial 1st degree. Some of them had a speed of 6 and a strength of 4. Some had a speed of 3 and a strength of 6. Some had a speed of 5 and a strength of 6. But Logan was an evolved initial 3rd degree, who had a speed of 11 and a strength of 50. At the moment, the hero has evolved to the 1st level, whose speed is 7 and strength is 20. He has activated the ability of speed climbing, which has increased the probability of victory to close to 90%. A split second later, the guy began to torment his opponents with indescribable speed. The hero did not forget about their leader, who dared to threaten his girlfriend. Literally a few seconds later, this entire crowd of people was lying on the floor, motionless and most likely dead. He only left Logan alive, but even he couldn't understand how that was even possible. After all, last time he seemed like an ordinary person of low rank to him. He couldn't understand how the guy could become so much stronger in such a short time. Mason said that if he had used a weapon, they would all be dead already. But considering that he didn't touch them yesterday, the guy would give them another chance to survive. He set conditions for Logan, under which he would let them go only if the boss got on his knees and started barking like a dog, and then called him master. A little later, the merchant Alex was happy with what he had found and asked Mason to see if there was anything worthwhile there. The guy immediately replied that this was exactly what he needed and gave him some canned food in return. The guy's last word was for the merchant to continue collecting gold, and for him not to worry, he would not deprive him of canned goods. In this world, gold is worth nothing, which is why the merchant could not understand what the guy would do with this gold. The cores have long become the new currency, and that guy had 20 bars, rich. The guy told Melanie that he would go get the goods. He would also bring food and water. She only told him to be careful on the way. After Melanie left, he began to travel back in time. He moved to his bed. Just at that moment, someone was knocking intensively on the door of the room. The guy immediately got out of bed and went to the door to find out who was knocking. As it turned out, it was Emma. She immediately threw herself into the guy's arms, and the guy was pleasantly surprised by this. The girl asked the guy what was wrong with him, where he had been all this time. She couldn't get through to him. He immediately started making up some excuses. He told her that he had gone somewhere on business, and there was no connection, and asked her for forgiveness. The girl was a little angry about this because the guy needed to warn her about the trip, because he scared her to death. She was already going to the police, asked him never to do that again, and to be sure to tell her if he suddenly decided to go somewhere. Slightly embarrassed, the guy said that he would take this into account. Mason took her hand and said that as an apology, he was giving her a gift. But Emma said that she didn't need any gifts, because the guy was already broke and didn't need any extra expenses. But the guy asked the girl not to worry about his finances, because he had earned a lot on the trip. He said that he would buy her everything she wanted and everything she liked. They came to some very stunning building, which showed in every way that it was for the rich. The guy noted that this place was quite sophisticated, but the girl, on the contrary, told the guy that this was a rather expensive boutique and asked him to look for another place. But the hero told the girl to choose something to her taste, and that she should be sure that he could afford to buy at least 100 of them. In the future, he would earn even more. The girl could not understand how he managed to earn so much. The guy turned to the assistant and asked her to show him the best piece of jewelry they had, to which she asked him to wait for literally a second, after which she brought an exquisite decoration, which the guy immediately hung around the girl's neck. The girl couldn't help herself and kissed the hero on the cheek. After that, they both became embarrassed. She said that she really liked it, and most importantly, that it was his gift. The guy told the assistant that they were taking him and asked her to pack him up. The hero asked the girl to wait for him here. He wants to take something to the bank. He promised to return soon. He went to the bank. Approaching the assistant, he asked if the bank accepted gold. The girl asked how many bars the guy would like to exchange, after which he opened his backpack, from which a mountain of gold literally began to shine. After the director himself found out who came to their bank, he hurried to see this person. At this time, the guy was sitting on the couch. When the man came running, he immediately began to apologize for the long wait. But the guy said that there was no problem with that. The director asked Mason if he could look at his gold bars, to which he replied that they were in his backpack and he could look, after which the director had exactly the same reaction as the bank staff. The guy said that the director could check the samples himself. There were 12 bars. He asked how much he could get for them. A few minutes later, the guy was already signing papers about exchanging the bars. Even the assistant asked the director how much money the guy received for such a quantity of bars. In total, he had 12 bars, each containing 99.6% gold, which amounted to $6,600,000. Returning to the jewelry store, the guy was slightly surprised by what he saw in front of him. He saw Emma and some stranger arguing over something incomprehensible. As it turned out, they were arguing over a necklace. Emma ordered the girl to take it off, but she argued by saying that Emma took the necklace but had not yet paid, which means that it does not belong to her. After the guy asked what happened here, Emma replied that this girl took her necklace. It was clear from the girl that she was very angry at the stranger. The girl handed the money to the seller and said what kind of necklace it was and even said that she didn't need change. But the guy interrupted the girl's conversation and said that he would pay in gold. After he took out this gold bar, it was clear from everyone present that they were very surprised by this. He said that this piece was enough to make 10 more of these necklaces. But the girl did not want to accept the fact that she was about to lose the necklace and began to make up stories that anyone could see that it was a fake, and repeated for the umpteenth time that she had paid for the necklace first. The seller apologized to the girl and said that there was already a reservation for this necklace. Even if she paid first, this does not give her the right to appropriate it for herself. A few seconds later, the saleswoman wrapped up the necklace and handed it to Emma, while the girl was furious. The stranger promised that the guy and the girl would still pay for this. Our heroes left the store with a luxurious gift. Emma suggested that the guy first go to the market for groceries and then go home, to which he politely agreed. But the guy's conversation was interrupted by a can that flew straight at his head. There were 5 hooligans standing in front of him. Apparently, their leader spat at that moment. As it turned out, the same girl who had argued with Emma was standing next to him. The man threatened the couple and asked how they dared to take the necklace from his woman, after which, as expected, they began to beat them. Mason immediately stood in front of the girl, and it was clear from his look that he was not scared at all and, in principle, could easily deal with them. And the girl at this time was very scared and suggested to the guy to just run away from here. After a few seconds, Emma finally opened her eyes to see what was happening. But she no longer saw the crowd of hooligans in front of her. And the guy said that they needed to go to the market as if nothing had happened. After the girl asked what happened to the hooligans, the guy, slightly joking with them, said that perhaps they had an epileptic seizure. A few minutes later, the girl and the guy were already at the market. The saleswoman said that they owed $5.50. At this time, some man approached the girl from behind. She was very surprised to see him. As it turned out, it was her uncle. She couldn't understand how her uncle knew where to look for her. He replied that he installed a surveillance app on her phone. He reminded the girl of what she had promised her father, also rudely adding that they were going home. But the guy stood up for the girl and said that she didn't want to go with him, so he was the only one left to go. But the man was already tired of repeating the same thing to the guy. The guy, like him, is not at all even with Emma. Her father is already looking for a suitable groom who will meet her needs, and when he finds him, they will immediately get married. The man asked the girl if she remembered her father's words about what he would do if she did not obey him. If she disobeys her father, then this guy's limbs will be cut off and thrown into the river. After these words, it was clear from the girl that she was scared and a little nervous. Having realized all the scenarios in her head, the girl decided that she would still go with the man, because it would be at least better for Mason himself. The guy shouted after his departing relatives for them to stop. He asked if they would let Emma go with him if he could prove that he had become much richer. The man chuckled and asked if Mason really wanted to say that he had more than $6 million in his account. Apparently, this was the very condition under which they would allow the guy to get any closer to the girl. The man asked the guy to come down to earth. Let him first try to earn $600 million in a year, then they could talk. Such words clearly made the guy feel luxurious. $600 million? Mason looked a little furious after hearing those words. The guy agreed to the man's terms. He was very unhappy with the whole situation, and it was clear from his eyes that he was really determined about the girl. The guy asked Emma to wait for him. He would definitely earn these $600 million and take her. Meanwhile, at one of the bases of the zombie world, 2 men were discussing something. One of them asked if they were able to find something, to which he answered that it was at the union of buildings on the mainland, where the main characters had just visited. They wanted 1,000 zombie cores for it. Upon hearing the amount, the man became furious, because all his property was worth exactly the same. A bunch of charlatans just wanted to fleece him blind. They conveyed that there would always be a buyer for this product, so it was up to the man, after which he began to think. The price is simply beyond all bounds, but if you buy this thing and give it to him, he will certainly agree to cooperate. The man ordered to go and bring him this thing, because he needed it too much. A joyful Mason was holding some bags and a bunch of bags in his hands, and he announced that he was back. Melanie was surprised because there was much more here than he brought last time. Rice flour, meat, eggs, milk, everything is there, the guy said. But the girl could not understand one thing: why the guy brought so much flour this time. The guy argued that this was so that the girl could bake. He remembers that she said that she would like to become a pastry chef, and from this action it was clear from her face that she was embarrassed. But the girl couldn't understand what the guy was talking about because her main task was to protect him. And where would he have time to bake? But the girl's wounds have not yet healed. The guy thinks that she should not accompany him next time. It is better for her to stay at the base and rest. Melanie's sister told the guy that she could go with him then. He was happy about this because he could use some help. But Melanie stood between them and objected. She asked what her sister was up to again. She wasn't planning to quietly kill the guy on the way, but Becca said that her little sister could hardly do something so insidious. She feels a bit awkward about being a burden on them, so she'll go with the guy and do her best to protect him. The girl has nothing to worry about. Next, we are shown Base 4. The guy couldn't understand why the entrance to the base was so narrow. The girl began to explain to him that it was to make it more impregnable, so the base was protected from zombies and people. But the base was huge and seemingly powerful. 2 men were carrying some kind of box. And from the way they were carrying it, it was clear that there was something valuable in there. A split second later, they lowered the case. The man asked if there was treasure inside. He ordered them to quickly let him see it. It was clear from his eyes that there was something really valuable inside. We see that the man opened the box. There was some kind of stone staff lying there, which didn't really look like any kind of treasure. Even the man himself did not believe that it was really it, because it looked like an ordinary stone staff. He asked if they could have slipped in a fake. When the man almost touched the staff, he was abruptly stopped. As it turned out, the staff contains cadaveric poison, and even evolved beings are at risk of infection from touching it. A 5th-level evolved being can only hold the staff in his hands for 15 minutes. The man was surprised that there was such a concentration of poison in this staff. It was no wonder that he needed this staff so much. The man asked if the subordinate was checking whether the staff was real. He reported that for the experiment, non-evolved people without any wounds or diseases were taken. All of them became zombies immediately after one touch. The man thanked his subordinate for his excellent work. He is always calm when he takes on a task. At this time, they were interrupted by a guy who entered the room and addressed the commander. He said that 2 traders had arrived and wanted to exchange goods. They have a huge backpack filled with canned goods. At first glance, they are rich people. After such words, it was clear from the man's expression that he was surprised. The man was very happy about this, because he had just run out of food, and now the delicacy was brought right to his door. He was happy to look at this meat. At this time, Becca was telling that, to tell the truth, she and her sister had not really cooperated with this base. So first, they needed to test the waters. The guy said that he needed to get rich as soon as possible. The girl seemed to have said that here you could meet a maximum of 3rd degree evolved. He told the girl not to worry. He promised that if anything happened, they would get out of here in one piece. Just when the guy finished telling his story, the commander burst into the room. He was in a very joyful and upbeat mood. He immediately apologized for such a long wait. The man said that he heard that they had brought a very good product for exchange and asked to look at it. The guy showed backpacks completely filled with canned goods. The man was very surprised by this because such a jar costs a lot, and here, there are probably more than 100 of them. The man immediately gave some sign to his subordinate, after which the latter nodded to him. The man asked what they wanted in return. The girl answered that they needed cannonballs and also gold or other valuables. But at that moment, the door to the room slammed shut. It is clear that such an action confused the sellers present. With a malicious smile on his face, the man said that they just wanted to talk and bargain. The sellers should lower the price. Oddly enough, the man ordered his subordinates to take them a few seconds later. The girl immediately started to run away, but she was surprised that the guy stood like a stone and had no intention of moving anywhere. Exhaling, the guy asked why all people in this world are the same. He just wants to calmly make a deal with them. At this time, 2 fighters almost got close to the guy. The guy once again began to glow yellow, and such actions greatly confused the men. The guy activated the ability of speed climbing. The use of abilities makes the fingers much stronger, which allows them to dig into a hard surface like a stone. At the same time, the strength in the legs increases, increasing the jumping skill, due to which a person can move much faster. Finally, the overall precision of movement of all limbs increases, allowing a person to deliver precise and fast strikes. That's exactly what this guy was doing. He was kicking his opponent's asses. Thus, the ability allows you to defeat your opponent in a very short time. There was only one man left in front of the guy, and all of his remaining subordinates were lying on the floor after fighting with the guy. The sister was very surprised by this because she did not expect that the guy was incredibly strong. The man immediately began to make excuses and said that it was just a misunderstanding and that they had gotten it all wrong. The most brutal cries of pain came from the room. The man begged the guy with all his might not to hit him. He even agreed that he was wrong. The guy asked whether it was really necessary to force him. You know, the guy himself doesn't like violence. The man promised that he would give them what they wanted in return and would not cheat them with the goods. The girl was furious because the man wanted to kill them and take the goods for himself. He really thinks that they will cooperate with a dirty traitor like him. But the guy slightly upset the girl after he said that they would be happy to cooperate with him. The girl couldn't understand the guy's decision. How can you trust a man at all? Someday he will definitely stab them in the back. The guy already understood that trading in a post-apocalyptic world can lead to encountering predatory people, but if you let them know what awaits them if they use dirty tricks, then trading will become much more enjoyable and fruitful. The man said that it was not too late for them to show respect to such a strong person as the guy. Moreover, they would not dare to even think about dirty tricks. He told the girl and the guy to follow him. He would show them the product they needed, after which he led them to the room where that very box lay and pointed at it with his hand. saying that this was exactly the product. But the guy thought it was just a broken stick and said he didn't need it. The man began to tell that although the guy doesn't know, but to tell the truth, he sold almost all of his property to buy this staff, which is why, out of desperation, he wanted to take away their goods. Their life began to be hard. And this is far from a broken stick. This is a very rare and valuable weapon. It increases the damage you inflict. They say with this staff you can defeat even someone who is higher than you on the evolutionary level. If the guy does not believe, he can try it himself. The hero was surprised by such information. He did not expect that this stick, in his words, was so cool. And the commander was just waiting for this moment. And now the guy only needs to hold the staff in his hands for about 5 seconds, and the corpse poison will turn him into a zombie. In the man's opinion, the boy's end had come. The guy suddenly changed his mind and said that it would be better for a man to try. The commander began to justify himself by saying that, after all, a weapon is just a thing, and it's better to try it yourself. But the guy doesn't want to. It's better to let the man try it. He'll see how strong this staff is. It was clear from his face that he was very nervous. He even started to stutter, but the guy in a rough voice told him to try the staff anyway. Taking the staff in his hand but first wrapping it in a rag, he handed it to the man. When the staff approached, the commander became very scared. The guy repeated once again for the man to take the staff in his hands, after which the staff fell to the floor. The man almost had a heart attack from this. The guy asked if the commander really thought that he hadn't figured out what the catch was. The guy gave him another chance to cooperate, but he didn't appreciate it. He said that the man made his own choice. Becca, watching this, told Mason that he needed to kill the man, which is exactly what he started doing a few seconds later. He grabbed him with his most powerful fist and started strangling him. The man was writhing in incredible pain, and at that time he was begging not to kill him. At that moment, the guy remembered how he saw in front of him the hanging body of a girl who had simply stolen a few drugs. From such memories, the guy's anger became even greater, and the force with which he strangled the man also became greater. He recalled the words of the judge, who asked if it was pleasant to feel that someone's life was in your hands. After this, the guy immediately snapped, and he immediately let go of the man. After which the guy simply started to leave, and told the girl to take their things because they were leaving. Becca was perplexed by what she saw, because she hoped that the guy was about to kill the man for what he did to them. The girl couldn't understand if they would really just leave. A minute ago the man wanted to kill them. Why shouldn't they do the same? Becca thought that she understood the guy. She thought that he did not want to watch a man die painfully. Then you can use poison or cut off his head with one blow of a knife. There are many other ways to make sure that he does not suffer for long. But the guy asked the girl to stop. The hero decided that he would probably take the staff. It would be considered compensation. At this time, the girl was thinking that the guy was just a coward. He had such abilities, but he was pretending to be a pathetic Mother Teresa. Such a person was definitely not capable of protecting his sister, in the girl's opinion. Following the departing couple, the man asked them to stop. Very unexpectedly, the commander asked the guy to help their base. The girl became even more furious about this. She asked if the man thought they were some kind of charity organization, but he begged them to agree. If they agreed, then when everything was over, he would give them all the valuables that he had at the base. He argued his appeal by saying that they were in complete despair, and that if no one helped them, the base would soon come to an end. The girl asked if this was another dirty trick. Apparently the man was really tired of living. But the commander began to tell that they sent a huge amount of things to the 5th degree evolved one so that he would help him. But he still asked for even more. Now they are simply forced to go on robberies. The man asked them to follow him. When they see everything, they will understand everything themselves. He asked them to look at the hole below. He asked if they saw the corpses. To be honest, it was hard not to see them, even from afar. The man explained that these were people who were killed in just one day, and it is clear that the guy could not understand why there were so many corpses and who did it. Every day, several dozen people die at their base, and this is not the work of strangers. As it turned out, the head of their base was to blame for everything. To prevent infection, they burn corpses every day. Anyone approaching their base would smell the nauseating smell of burning flesh. The girl couldn't understand if their leader had really gone crazy. If he continued to kill so many people every day, very soon there would be no one left at their base. The man said that the girl was right, which is why he decided to overthrow the leader and lock him in prison. The guy asked if this was the reason why he sold everything to get the help of the 5th stage evolver, to which the man replied that the guy was right. But one such evolving one will not be enough. At least 3 strong fighters are needed because their leader evolved to the 7th degree. At this time, the man recalled how their leader, with one movement and 2 fingers, literally struck the head of some man, and he died instantly from this. And at that moment, some stranger ran past. A split second later, the stranger was already lying on the floor, bloody and dead. And the leader kept repeating that they all had to die. At this time, some big guy and a slightly shorter guy with glasses were standing and looking at the man with a seemingly condemning look. The man approached them and was happy because he had finally found them. The big guy began to slightly rudely inform the man that even though they had agreed to help him, he should not forget about their conditions. They would only begin to act if at least several fifth-degree evolved ones gathered. But somehow he doesn't feel that among all those present there is that third fighter. The brute asked if the commander was trying to trick them. The man began to explain everything. Among them there is no evolving fifth degree, but he found someone who knows how to increase his degree. It is clear that the man could not understand what the commander was talking about. He immediately asked his subordinate if it was him. He felt that he had the fourth degree. He asked him how he could increase it and defeat him. But the subordinate reported that the man was mistaken and that it was not him at all. A few seconds later, Mason appeared behind the man. The commander introduced him and said that this was the one he was talking about, also adding that the guy had outstanding strength. The man was slightly surprised to see the guy. The bully reported that the guy had apparently evolved to the first degree. He asked if the guy would be able to increase the degree by defeating the fifth degree evolver. Mason replied that it would not be difficult for him because he had already won once. After these words, the man began to laugh loudly, almost throughout the entire base, also adding that the guy was definitely wrong. He also told the commander that the guy was deceiving him. The big guy started to say that there is no one in the world who would be able to step over 3 degrees at once, and the guy says that he can step over as many as 4, but it just sounds funny. Mason said that he was right. Last time he was very lucky. That's why he was able to defeat the fifth degree evolved, so he himself does not know how much his strength can increase. That's why he decided to wait for them. He offered to fight and compare their strength. The guy also added that if he loses this battle, he will leave, and he will also give them a bag of canned goods as compensation. Anti-toxic gloves, made of a special material, protect the skin from the penetration of poison. The commander, hearing this, began to separate them, arguing that they should not use force and that there was no need to check who was stronger. He said that if the guy proves that he can rise 4 degrees, then he leaves to defeat the 7th degree evolver. They need to understand the situation well. He is not going to entrust his life into the hands of who knows who. The guy agreed with the commander. It was just sparring. No one should get hurt. The thug asked the guy to calm down, also adding that he was not going to kill anyone. A man and a boy stood in the middle of the square preparing for a sparring match. At this time, someone waved a red flag, which meant the sparring had begun. The brute immediately began to attack, but the guy managed to react and fought off the blow with the staff. The guy was clearly lucky that he had this staff in a sparring match with such a strong opponent. The man's blow to the staff sent out a vibration. Even Mason himself was surprised by how much power was in one blow. His hands even started shaking. He also noticed that the man was too fast, and from the very beginning of the fight he had to act at the limit of his capabilities. The brute was surprised that the guy was able to dodge all of his blows, but still agreed that the guy could do something. But the man believed that the boy did not have enough strength to jump over 4 whole degrees. Mason was very surprised after the man broke through the stone with one blow. All the 5th level evolved ones were so fierce. The guy started to run away. It is clear that the man could not understand where he was running. What was the point of always dodging? But the hero said that he would refuse, otherwise he would go straight to heaven. All he could do was run. But the thug still caught up with the hero. The guy had the perfect plan. In his opinion, he was going to pierce the man's chest with this staff. Suddenly he stopped abruptly and struck the man right below the groin, and the blow was so strong that it is difficult to describe in words. It was very strange, but the man's expression did not change at all. Mason believed that the thug could not say a word from the pain. He said that this was his signature blow, and the technique was called abortion. The guy still hasn't removed the staff from the man's penis. The commander noticed that the guy had hit the bullseye, after which he jokingly asked the guy standing next to him if his friend had managed to get a wife. But he said that there was nothing to worry about. His special ability to make the body harden, he could easily cope with such a minor attack. But the commander reported that there was poison on the staff and asked if his friend would be able to resist its effect. At this time, the man began to glow with a blue light. And after that, he threw the guy several meters away from himself so hard that his staff flew out of his hands. The guy, to put it mildly, rolled on the ground. After which, without stopping, the man began to attack the guy, and he dealt a powerful blow to the head. The blow was so strong that a stone lying nearby broke. After which, standing over the guy, the man announced that he had lost. He said that the hero is really strong. Only at the first stage, but already has such high speed and accuracy, he believes the guy would have no problem dealing with 3rd stage evolved or 4th stage weaklings. But in battle, he relies only on his strength without any strategy. It is better for him to return home and train properly. He said that they were leaving. The commander asked if they would return. The brute replied that the commander should not worry. They would work off everything he paid them. When the commander found a worthy 5th degree evolver, they would come again. This guy was not strong enough. He had no chance against their crazy leader. He would be killed immediately. At this time, some zombie reported that it was true. Coming out of the shadows, he said that this guy was no good, and also added that he would be much better suited for this role. But the guy was only surprised that his staff and gloves ended up in the hands of a stranger. The stranger apologized for stealing, but he also said that the guy had used the staff incorrectly. But what confused Mason most was that zombies could talk. The stranger didn't like these words. He shouted that he was a man. The guy immediately apologized. But the stranger crawled out so suddenly that it seemed to him that it was a corpse. But the commander, on the contrary, was glad to meet him. He asked if he had finally agreed to help them. But he said that he didn't come for them, but for the staff. He had been looking for it for so long, and now they had finally met. But the guy was indignant and said that the commander gave this staff to him. The stranger asked the commander if this boy was really telling the truth. He shouted that this staff was originally intended for a man. He gave a lot to get it. He only asked to help them, and he gave him the staff as a gift. The man laughed at this, demonstratively covering his mouth with his hand. The commander asked the guy not to get angry because he had no choice. He offered to stay with them. Then, when everything was over, he would give him an even cooler weapon. The guy told the man that he agreed to help them, but he had one condition. When everything is over, they will exchange things only with him. He will become their only supplier. It is clear that the man was slightly surprised by such a condition. He asked the guy if he had enough products, because they mainly take medicine and food, to which he replied that his sources allow it. Besides, his prices are quite low. He just needs gold or other jewelry. The man said that he agreed to the guy's conditions. The guy in glasses asked his brother how he felt after such a powerful blow, but he replied that everything was fine. All those present gathered in some small room and discussed something. The man thanked them for their desire to help, and now he wants to tell them the plan in detail. For comfortable communication in the future, the man asked them to briefly introduce themselves and tell about themselves. The big guy introduced himself. His name is James. He is a 5th degree evolved final stage. His special ability is body hardening. A normal bullet cannot hurt him. The guy with glasses was named Robertson. He was a 5th degree evolved initial stage, with the special ability to freeze everything he touches with one touch. The zombie-like man's name was Oscar. He was a 5th level evolved being. He didn't reveal his special abilities, but only said so that others could guess. Mason introduced himself, that he is the 1st degree evolved initial stage special ability of concentration, and the girl introduced herself as Beka. She is the 2nd degree evolved final stage, special ability the brain is able to calculate like a supercomputer, after which the girl was surprised at why signs like profiles on a dating site appear next to each of them. But the guy did not answer that he has no idea what it is. It is better not to ask at all. After everyone finally introduced themselves, the commander began to tell his plan. The head of their base evolved to the 7th degree in the final stage. The special ability of his body becomes liquid. This is a big problem for them. It will be difficult to catch him. But one careless move and he will kill them. His plan is to lure him into a secret room first. Oscar will then poison him to paralyze his nervous system, and their fighters will capture him, and Robertson will wait for the right moment to freeze him. And with the help of a mechanism, they will lock him in a capsule cage. James said that the plan was really good and asked when they would start acting, but Oscar at that time just laughed because now everyone knows about his special ability. The commander said that they couldn't allow people to continue to die. Tomorrow they would carry out the plan to capture them. The commander went down somewhere into the basement, and right next to him stood the very head of the base. Even though the man had a plan, it still inspired some fear in him. The chief asked mysteriously if the commander was really going to kill him and end all these deaths. At this time, the head hit the commander with a very strong stream of water, but at this time James covered him, who didn't care because he knew how to harden. James stood in front of the commander and ordered him to retreat and was ready to engage in a fight with the chief. It was clear from the leader's look that he did not understand what would happen, but he was also ready for everything and everyone who might come now. And at this time, as planned, Oscar attacked the head with his staff and was about to poison him with it. But it was not to be. While Oscar was trying to strike, The head calculated everything and almost hit him with a stream of water, but Mason noticed it in time and caught Oscar. The man laughed and was glad that Mason saved him. He said that if it weren't for the guy, he would have already been finished, and at that time he stroked his cheek with his hands. Well, James didn't have time for any jokes. He was serious about winning. But as it turned out, in the fight, somehow the leader was able to inflict scratches. Yes, small ones. But still, these are scratches on a person who has the ability to freeze. A split second later, he hit him right in the ribs. The brute was surprised by this. He could not understand how the leader was able to pierce his hard body. But the man said that liquid with high pressure and high rotation speed is capable of breaking through even steel. At this time, Robertson came running to help his brother. He began to freeze the water. It helped, after all, and the leader even took a step back. It was clear from his expression that he was unhappy with all this, and it was also clear from the guy that he was slightly wondering what to do now. But once again, Mason is taken away from the leader in time by his ally. Meanwhile, while the leader was focused on Mason taking his ally, James was ready to deliver a finishing blow from behind, which is exactly what he did a split second later. The man shouted throughout the room that he had violated the chapter's form, and that meant that now it was Robert's turn to freeze him. Robertson began his task within seconds, but something apparently went wrong, and this gathering of water turned into some kind of hurricane, throwing Roberts back. After Mason asked what happened, he was told that he dissipated so that the guy couldn't freeze him. The commander ordered that all openings at the entrances and exits be guarded. He could not be allowed to escape, and at this time the head began to take on the form of a man. His body began to take on a strange form of a black cocoon. He used one of his abilities. Even Robertson couldn't figure out what the chief was trying to do, and the commander said that things were bad. He was going to use that very technique, after which the commander ordered everyone to take out their shields and stand behind the screen. And the head apparently has already started using some kind of technique. After 2 seconds, he began to thrust a stream of water into everyone's chest, breaking through their shields before doing so. He even managed to thrust his liquid into the commander. The leader tried to stab James, but to no avail. James told everyone to stand behind him. As it turned out, the leader increased the number of water jets, so their strength became less. Now his body can handle it. And the head apparently had no intention of stopping. The commander shouted that he still hadn't recovered. Let everyone attack now. After this technique, he becomes weaker for some time. Within 10 seconds, the water would be back to the state it was in at the very beginning. He ordered Oscar to freeze it quickly. Hearing the order, Robertson asked Mason to push him. They were already practically in this water ball. At this time, the head inside the ball concentrated his energy. At this time, he saw nothing and heard nothing. The guy has to manage to freeze it completely in those 10 seconds, which can be incredibly difficult. The leader still didn't feel anything, but it was already clear that icy stones were floating around his face. It felt like the guy was about to finish. Mason shouted that everything worked out. But Robertson himself didn't think so. It was clear from his look that he was nervous. Although this dome of water was indeed already completely covered in ice, Robertson reported that things were bad. The man had sped up the circulation of the water, so the freezing had slowed down. While Robertson was confused about what to do now, Oscar told him not to worry, and he would help. He couldn't escape, after which he began to direct some of his energy into the icy ball. The liquid disperses quickly, so his poison can't spread throughout his body, and now the situation is ideal. This poison will put him to sleep forever, and without its antidote, no one will be able to save him. A few seconds later, the man had already finished pouring the poison. The commander exhaled. He was clearly glad that they were finally able to defeat the barbarian. And now, no one will threaten their city or anything around it. All those present decided to gather and celebrate this great victory. The commanders began to thank everyone taking part in this for their help. As a token of gratitude, they prepared these delicious dishes for them. Mason clearly did not like them. And of course, what kind of dinner party would it be without the company of girls? After which the commander told the girls to come in. All the men looked at the girls with caution at first. The girls were all truly incredibly beautiful. In a split second, the man was literally drooling over these girls, and they were already arguing about whose would be who. Robertson and Oscar immediately began flirting with girls. The stranger asked Mason if he was the odd hero out, and also called him young, which made the guy a little embarrassed. And Becca, at this time, was clearly unhappy with all this. As expected, men are simply disgusting. After some time, all the men were practically unconscious, which is why the commander decided that the girls should take them to their rooms. Mason was led into the room by 2 girls. One of them was surprised at how cute the guy was. He drank every drop and was already drunk. and the other girl said that he was her type. They noted that it must be unpleasant to sleep so sweaty, and that it needed to be wiped off. For some time, Robertson also flirted with two girls, and in a split second their things were scattered across the room. And Oscar told the girls that they were very pretty, just his type. But the girls, on the contrary, were afraid of him. He asked them not to be afraid because he would not do anything bad. Meanwhile, two girls were shown the door. As it turned out, it was James, who thanked them for seeing them off, but asked them to go back to their place. To be honest, it was expected that James would not play these dirty games, because it is clear from him that he is a very serious and purposeful person, after which he slammed the door right in the girls' faces. In another room at this time, girls were wringing out rags, wiping sweat from Mason's body. They thought he would sleep until the morning. The commander ordered them to ensure he had a good rest, but he was sleeping soundly, so they would not be able to take care of him. They came to the conclusion that they would just wipe it off and go. One of the girls didn't think it was possible to sleep so restlessly. It seems that today they will return to their place. After some time, someone hit the guy in the face with their hand. He immediately jumped up from this blow and asked who did it. As it turned out, it was Becca who was unhappy. She asked if he had had a good time that night. He was so tired that he slept until noon. She also asked how much longer he was going to hang around in this place. She called him a pervert, started pulling his ears, and ordered him to get up quickly. The guy could not understand why she suddenly became so angry. At first, she called him Brother Mason. Meanwhile, James and Robertson were taking a morning stroll around the base. James asked his partner if they were okay, because he was walking around holding his back the whole time and was slightly writhing in pain. Raising his finger up, he said that everything was fine. The commander asked everyone why they were leaving so quickly and also suggested that they stay for a couple of days. James reported that they couldn't, and they still had a lot of other things to do. They needed to return to their organization as soon as possible and report on the work done. Mason wrote down all the goods needed at their base, so now he needs to go get them. In about 3 days, he will send them everything. Oscar told Mason that he was wasting his talent in trading. He invited him to join him. He saw that he had potential. If he goes with him, he will teach him a quick way to evolve further. His family has a secret technique that will help him make a breakthrough quickly. But Robertson told Mason not to believe him. If he really had such a technique, then would he still be at such a low rank? As it turned out, the man had already taken a young guy, and no one still knows where he is now. Despite this conversation, James slipped the guy a walkie-talkie. But for some reason, even though Mason was from normal time, he still asked what it was. James said that this is a radio with which he can contact him at any time. Their organization needs people like him. If the guy decides to join them, just let him contact him, and he will tell their location. After this, the character said goodbye. 3 days later, a man was running through the base, clearly in a hurry. He ran into some room, slightly out of breath. The man said that Mason had arrived. The commander was surprised that the guy had gotten everything he needed so quickly. He asked him to quickly go out and see for himself. After all, as it turned out, his goods were on 3 whole trucks, which cannot but surprise. As it turned out, the man had drunk too much and told the guy a whole list of things, and he actually brought everything, and in just 3 days. Mason informed the commander that the truck was everything he asked for, and added that it was time to unload it all. After some time, the people at the base finished unloading it all. They really were seeing so much food for the first time. Now they have so many seeds and fertilizers, their self-sufficiency system will be simply perfect. How wonderful, they just need to grow it. And then in a year, the people at their base will no longer have to go hungry. The commander asked if the guy was some kind of celestial being. Where did he get so many things, and of excellent quality? It was truly incredible. The guy said that he couldn't say that, but as for the seeds, food, and other things, he would bring as much as they asked for. The main thing for him was to get his payment for it. The commander pulled out a bag of jewels in front of the guy and said that this was his payment, which they had agreed on. The hero was very indignant. There really was very little here. He brought as many as 3 trucks. He asked if the commander was trying to deceive him. But the man couldn't understand why the guy was so angry, because it was a whole bag of crystals. He asked if the guy hadn't heard of such a thing. It was several times more expensive than the cores that he had originally promised him. As it turns out, 1 crystal contains 100 skill points. The guy was surprised that such a tiny stone contained a whole 100 skill points. It was 50 times more expensive than the core. But then the man remembered what he had promised the guy and asked him to go with him. To be honest, they didn't manage to find that much gold in the base. They turned the whole storeroom upside down and finally found something. The man handed the guy a whole box of gold bars. He said that this was all they had. The guy's eyes lit up from what he saw. He said that it was more than enough and thanked the man. The guy told the girls that he needed to go away on business. He would be back in a couple of days. The girl asked if he would bring another white rabbit, because she had already eaten everything. Mason was already sitting with this box of gold in his room. He noticed that this box was even heavier than the previous one. The guy noticed that there was some kind of picture printed on the lid. Well, it doesn't look like a print. It looks like the lid was made from a real painting. There's even a signature. As it turned out, it was a painting by Picasso himself. But the guy, not recognizing the name, thought it was a very strange name, but he really liked the painting. He decided not to sell this painting due to illiteracy and simply decided to hang it in his room for decoration. Meanwhile, a man with a Cuban cigar in his mouth said that this Picasso painting was truly mesmerizing. It was definitely worth the 200 million spent. And a subordinate said that tonight there would be a meeting between Emma and the groom candidate the man had chosen. Basically, as is already clear, it was Emma's father. He asked his subordinate to make sure that everything went well, so that he wouldn't let her do anything wrong. The man asked what to do with Mason. They still haven't figured out where he got the 20 gold bars that he recently exchanged at their bank. If they report everything to the police, they won't be able to investigate the case themselves. But the man said that there was no need to report to the police. He told the employees to approve the operation, since he was able to get so much gold in such a short time. Then he obviously has his own sources. His company is currently experiencing a gold shortage, so they will not touch him for some time, but he and Emma will definitely not be together. He believed that only a capable man could be her husband. Meanwhile, the girl and the prospective groom had already met. He said that he didn't know if she would like the restaurant he had chosen, to which she coldly replied that she wouldn't. The guy said that he was told that the girl had been sitting at home all the time lately and asked if she wanted to go to Ostrovok with their family for a couple of days. It was very beautiful there. But she again refused the guy and said that she was not interested. But the guy continued to insist. He asked where she would like to go. He often goes on business trips with business meetings, so he knows his way around abroad quite well. But Emma again said that she would not like to go anywhere. The girl couldn't take it anymore and decided to tell it like it is. It was her father who told her to meet the guy. She doesn't plan to continue communicating with the guy in the future. Moreover, there are rumors that the guy likes to play and throw, so he does not need to pretend to be a gentleman, since they have already had dinner. She suggests not to waste any more time, after which she said goodbye to the guy. He gave her a disapproving look and called her ungrateful. After some time, the girl came into the house. The father said that he knew how their dinner went. She was instantly surprised by her father's presence in her house. The man said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and asked why she didn't even call him dad now. The girl told her father to leave if he had nothing to say. This was her apartment, and if he came again without warning next time, she would call the police. The father said that if the girl continued to resist him, then all the candidates he had carefully selected would simply run away in horror, and her father would have a hard time. The girl was furious. Her father treats her like a thing that can be exchanged for something valuable, because he knows perfectly well that she likes someone else. Father said that Mason was not at all outstanding. He would not make her happy. He would not dare to pass on his business to him. Sooner or later, he would be gone. So it was necessary to choose a worthy successor. But the girl could not understand why her father decided that Mason was not worthy. He was not an outstanding person in his youth either. She does not care who he wants to pass his inheritance on to. She wants to marry the one she chooses. He asked if Mason really needed to die. He had already told her that he would disappear forever if she didn't listen to him. Let her just do as he said. He was trying for the sake of her future. The girl believed that her father wanted to drive her crazy, just like her mother. She told him that this was his true goal. He wanted the girl to hang herself too. These words not only perplexed the man but also enraged him, and he ordered her to shut up. The girl began to blame her father for the fact that her mother had gone crazy. After these words, the man clearly couldn't take it anymore and hit the girl in the face, after which there was a deathly silence between them. Meanwhile, the guy was in his room making a list of what he needed to buy tomorrow. It seemed like he had already made everything, but he remembered about the white rabbit. At this time, someone called him at his apartment. The guy was surprised who could come to him at such a late hour. As it turned out, it was Emma. The guy asked the girl why she didn't pick up the phone when he called her. He wanted to go to her tomorrow. He also added that the girl should not worry. He would need less than a year. He would earn enough money and then her father would definitely accept him. But the girl didn't really listen to the guy, after which she kissed him passionately. Then she abruptly began to take off his t-shirt, but the guy stopped her. The guy noticed that the girl had a strange expression on her face. He asked if something had happened to her, or if it was related to her father. But the girl asked not to discuss it, just let the guy not take his eyes off her today. The girl said that although they had not seen each other for only a couple of days, she missed him so much that she asked him to hug her tightly. The girl said that she wanted to remember the guy's smell. The guy couldn't believe that today would be the day when he would say goodbye to his virgin status. And in addition, it would happen to his loved one. Emma asked the guy to unbutton her dress, which he basically did a few seconds later. She thanked him for this,